Hello and welcome to the Football Friday podcast. First time ever doing a podcast. We didn't get to do a final show here at our university. As always, for those that have ever listened to us before in the area, Alex Kozora. Also know me from SteelersDepot.com. I'll do the shameless plug first before Matt Catrillo also joining me here beats me to it. Matt, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Alex. We're finally only a couple days away from the draft, and I'm disappointed we can't watch together this year, as I'll be back home by then.
I've said it before. I'm absolutely crushed by that fact. But I wanted to do one more show. We did something for TV. Now we wanted to do one more to cover the NFL draft. Didn't get to have our annual draft show on radio, so we're switching to sitting in your dorm room.
First of all, it's a luxury apartment. Okay, let's get
looking at it now.
Luxurious apartment here in Eagle Park.
Absolutely nothing luxurious.
Large studio. Let's get that right.
Is the tiniest place I've ever seen in my entire life. Not the point here. Point is, we've hurriedly put together some talking points, a rundown, to help fill you in with Thursday's NFL draft. Gonna be a lot of fun though. But let's actually kick things off with some talk that matters. I was just talking about ourselves. And Matt, I'll start with you. We had asked this during our show on TV, but just give me your overview. And this is a broad question. Answer it however you wish. Just your overview of this year's draft class.
Well, Alex, I think there's just one word to describe this year's class, and that's the depth of what we see in this year's class. I mean, there's obviously a few players like Sammy Watkins, for instance, or Jadeveon Clowney, that Mike Evans from Texas A&M, that can be stars in this league. But when you really look at everybody else, everyone will bring depth to your team, which a lot of times is overrated by most people that watch the NFL draft, or just NFL fans in general. I mean, sure, you want to add players that can make an impact right away, and certainly there's players in this draft that can do that, but adding depth to your team at certain positions certainly helps you, especially when you get late in the season with injuries and stuff like that. And that's probably the most unique part about this year's class, I think, compared to the last few that we've seen, that you can add these guys just for those types of reasons.
You know, I was going to mention that, and I'll expand on it a little bit. There's 95 underclassmen in this year's draft, which is a record number, and that number is likely to just continue to raise and raise and raise. But more importantly, the effect that it's going to have on the draft is something I'm really interested in seeing. You talk about it in different levels. One, you're having younger players, guys that are 20, 21 years old. So Stephon Tuitt, for example, is just 21 years old. And so there's a maturity factor there and a growth and development. It might take more time to groom these guys and coach these guys up as they still are growing mentally and physically and learning how to play the game. So there might be some patience needed with teams that take, a redshirt sophomore or junior, and you're going to see more and more and more of that. The other element is that because it's so deep, a lot of these seniors are getting pushed back because of these, hotshot underclassmen that are getting to come out and be first-round picks. So now when you talk about depth, players that could have been second or third-round picks are now third and fourth round. And then you look at guys who were sixth and seventh-round picks who now got pushed back by that surge of underclassmen. So it's not even just all 7 rounds as much as it is look at free agency now and your priority free agents. You can still probably find some really good players in that because, again, it's only, 256 picks, whatever the number is. You're going to have a lot of good prospects this entire draft, and then after the draft, obviously the work's not over. So that's what I'm really interested in seeing, is that you're going to have, deep classes really across the board. And then just on a side note, I am concerned that with 95 underclassmen, you got some guys that declared that probably should not have declared. And yes, you're going to get that every single year.
Certainly a lot of projects you might see, a lot of raw talent, a lot of people that maybe just 1 year away and they're coming out a little bit too early. But because of the way the class is overall, like I mentioned, it's a chance for them to get to be projected and be drafted maybe a little bit higher than what they would in some other classes.
Yeah, but I mean, some of these guys are, if you're not going to be a first-round pick, you should declare. You should go back to school, get your degree,
I agree.
Try to come out next year and hopefully improve your draft stock. And yes, there are some circumstances where it's okay to, where it's understandable because of financial issues or coaching changes or things of that nature. But I think at this point, the NFL might, I don't know if it comes down to the NFL or the NCAA, probably NCAA, of creating some sort of system so that unless you get a third round grade or higher, for example, from the NFL Draft Advisory Committee, you're not able to declare. And that's a little tricky, but just a side note on that is that 95 underclassmen, I mean, what's the quick math on that? More than a third of the draft picks that are available in the slots.
Yeah, it's really a problem, Alex, in all four of the major sports, and nonetheless just football. I mean, that's a different topic for another day, but it's definitely an interesting take there because I think, like you said, there are a lot of players that in this draft that might be coming out just a little bit early, and if you were to put something like that, maybe you wouldn't see that as much, but that's obviously another topic for another day, but an interesting point there.
Well, let's get into the actual draft now, Matt. Let's go with our top 5 prospects. We did this before in our TV show, but let's revisit them again, see if they've changed at all, or if you still maintain them. And so, give me your top 5, Matt.
Well, Alex, I have maintained my top 5 since our draft show on CUTV. First off is obviously Jadeveon Clowney. One phrase I actually have written in my report: "Freak of nature." End of story. So I'll move on there. Second is Jake Matthews, offensive tackle from Texas A&M. And Alex, this school always, for the last couple of drafts, have brought out really athletic offensive linemen, but this is the most athletic offensive lineman I have ever seen in this draft. Technique is absolutely textbook and flawless. As I mentioned, incredibly athletic, and as I would say in each game, once he gets his hands on you, it's over. I mean, that's how great of a textbook blocker he is, especially in the passing game, and this is a passing league now in the NFL, so obviously you better be pretty proficient in your pass blocking. But what's even more amazing, though, is his ability to stick with his blocker through the whole play, and obviously we knew who his quarterback was, Mr. Johnny Manziel, Johnny Football, where he would take a little bit more than 5 seconds to try and make a play, and obviously the Duke game comes to mind right away of that crazy play that he had, and through that whole entire play, Jake Matthews stuck with his block and allowing Johnny Manziel to come to that outside and make that throw on the run for the touchdown that brought Texas A&M back into that game. So you will, and especially most quarterbacks in the NFL are right-handed too. So that'd be the blind side of that quarterback. So that's a pretty good security blanket to have if you're a quarterback in the NFL, to have a guy that can stick with his man the whole way through the play. So I would say he's number 2. Number 3, Sammy Watkins, clearly the best receiver in this class by far. Breathtaking speed, very good route runner, also a very good blocker, which is always, I think, very critical, especially if you're a good running team in this league. Used a lot of the screen game, which is very effective. Alex, you know how much I love the screen passes, and for those of you that are going to be listening to this for the first time, that's my number 1 go-to play all the time. I think it's because I fell in love with when the Eagles still had Andy Reid, but nonetheless, it was still effective last year with Chip Kelly. And he's overall just very versatile and very dangerous, as Sammy Watkins. 4th, I have Khalil Mack, the outside linebacker from Buffalo. The fastest linebacker that I have ever seen. Has quick feet, a very good form tackler. Can also drop back into coverage, constantly all over the field. He's fast off the ball, either in 2 or 3 point stance. Lined up mostly in 2 point stance in the 3 games that I watched of him. He can bounce and weave through defenders, and I think that's a really cool ability to have, but he obviously needs to have a little bit better technique of swim and spin move. That would be my only really concern, but just his pure athleticism alone and his form tackling and the ability to drop back into coverage and make plays, and you just are on the Ohio State tape and you'll see that. He outran Braxton Miller on the one interception return that he had in that game when Buffalo was still in it. So he's at number 4, and then 5, Mike Evans, who is close, I would say a 1A for me when you're looking at this receiver class. I mean, I love his size. I love his athletic ability. I think he's got the best hands, really, of this draft. And a guy you can go up and throw the ball to. He's good in the bubble screen as well. So he's just a really good, versatile guy. So those would be my top 5.
And it should be pointed out for those that have not listened, Matt over here is a Philadelphia Eagles fan. So yes, we will be touching on them a little bit later in the podcast. Again, Football Friday podcast, Alex Kozora, Matt Catrillo. With Mike Evans, let me ask you this, Matt. A lot of these tall receivers, and fans love to become enamored with them. But an issue these tall receivers will have is with their separation ability. Can they sink their hips and get out of their breaks quickly? How do you evaluate Mike Evans in that regard?
He does have somewhat separation ability, and that does concern me a little bit, Alex. But his ability to jump up and get the ball. I mean, I forgot exactly what his numbers were in the vertical and the combine. Okay, 37 and a half.
Or 37 and a half.
I mean, so that's pretty darn good. So to me, I would, if I were a coach in the NFL or a quarterback, let's say, I would still have a pretty good amount of trust and confidence that he would be able to go up and get the ball.
Yeah, in my True Height study I did for Steelers Depot, which is not to say all end all by any means. It just was another way to look at height, measuring height plus arm length plus vertical. Mike Evans of the receivers at the combine came in first. I forget the exact number it was, but he came in first, well above anybody else, including guys like Calvin Benjamin and Brandon Coleman, guys that are a couple inches taller than Mike Evans. Excuse me. Just let me ask you one other real quick question before we go to my top 5 prospects. The nice thing about the podcast instead of TV is there's no time limit. Excuse me.
I like this. You know, I can talk all day. This is great.
I know you can. And we'll go in our top 5 projection here later on. But there's some rumors kicking up about Khalil Mack possibly going ahead of Jadeveon Clowney. I think he's changed. Clowney's now. It's not Jadeveon. It's now Jadeveon Clowney. Apparently, that just came out the other day. We've all been pronouncing it wrong apparently. But neither here nor there. How do you compare those two players, and how do you feel about these reports coming out, Matt?
Well, to me, I mean, Khalil Mack, like I said, is a very good player. Again, one of the fastest linebacker I've ever seen. But Jadeveon Clowney, however you pronounce his name now. Well, Clowney, yeah, Jay Clowney. He's just, like I said, he's a freak of nature. I mean, he's just so above everybody else in this draft. He probably would have been the number 1 overall pick last year if he had decided to come out, which is saying something else. He still would have been a top 5 pick, and even would threaten being the number 1 overall pick when you had guys like RG3 and Andrew Luck come out when they came out 2 years ago and to be the number 1 overall pick. So that's saying something in itself. To me, when you look at this draft, Jadeveon Clowney's up here on a different scale, and everybody else is a couple scales below. So it's actually kind of mind-boggling to me that Khalil Mack is actually being talked about as maybe going ahead of Jadeveon Clowney and possibly being the number 1 overall pick in this draft. He's very good, don't get me wrong, but when you put him up against Jadeveon Clowney, I really just don't see it.
Okay, and for my top 5, we'll start with Jadeveon Clowney. I share a lot of the same sentiments that you do, Matt. You talked about a guy that is that big at, he's 6'5", almost 6'6", 270, that can move that well. I mean, you use the term freak of nature, and usually that's a cliche. People say,
but it's
once
true.
in a generation talent. But I think for Clowney, it does fit. A guy with a great swim move that he can use as a crutch sometimes. I think he will use that too much, and it causes him to expose his torso and his ribs, and he can get washed in the run game sometimes. But that swim move is elite. The length that he has. The athleticism. I mean, there was one at the Clemson game to try to cut block him, and he was able to stay on his feet and make the tackle. Just that agility and the quickness that he has. Again, for guys of that size, you don't see it very often. I'm not really concerned about some of the off the field stuff, the speeding tickets. I mean, yes, you want to take a look at it, but it's not anything major to me. And there were questions about his effort and things of that nature. I really attribute that to nitpicking. Because he stayed that extra year and you get put under the microscope more than any actual serious effort issues. Does he have the best motor ever? No, he does not. But I don't see it to be really a true problem. And I think once you get into the NFL, and it doesn't always come as easy, it makes you play a little bit harder too. And yes, statistically, he was down this year significantly compared to where he was last year. But because he was getting double teamed and even triple teamed at times, your numbers, of course, are going to come down. Number 2, though, I do have Khalil Mack because you did see him against the big boys. I mean, people say he's a small school kid, and sure he is, but he's not from a Division II, Division III school. He's still in a Division I school in Buffalo and did very, very well against Ohio State, against guys like Jack Mehort, who's potential draft pick, will likely be drafted the right tackle for the Buckeyes. Put him on skates all game long. A guy that's the NCAA leader in tackles for a loss. I believe he has 75. Another guy could play hand up, hand down. Compares very favorably, I think, to Von Miller. Had experience dropping in the coverage. You look at the bowl game for Khalil Mack against San Diego State. He didn't do that well statistically in that game, but the Aztecs were running away from him every single play or double teaming him, and pass protection, and there's no higher compliment to a defensive player than that, in my opinion, at least. So I have Clowney 1. Still don't. I'm starting to lean towards possibly Mac going above Clowney, just from what I've heard, not what I think should happen, but what I think will happen. Just when I hear a guy like Gil Brandt say that, and that's his prediction, you don't take that lightly because I think he's a well-respected guy who's been in this business before. But Clowney 1 and then Mac 2. For me, Blake Bortles is number 3. I don't see him as much of a project as others do. A guy that has a good arm. It's not elite, but it's a good arm, kind of Mike Glennon-like, I think you could say. That can make throws on the run. Does a nice job of squaring his shoulders whenever he's flush out of the pocket. I think he has good pocket presence. That is one of the biggest factors I see in a quarterback is pocket presence, ability to slide and climb the pocket, and did really well this past year, statistically speaking. That's not to say all end all again, but that's success, of course, is going to be one of the things you look for. So I'm a big fan of Blake Bortles, and I put him above Manziel, Teddy Bridgewater, and the rest of this quarterback class, which is probably one of the more polarizing positions in this entire draft is his quarterback. And again, he has the size too. Some sneaky athleticism. I think he compares favorably to Ben Roethlisberger in the athleticism. The size, a little bit, but Ben is a lot. His mobility is better than Bortles, and Ben is tougher to be brought down than Bortles. Bortles still goes down relatively easy. He's not going to be Ben, who's going to shake off 3 guys and make a crazy play occasionally, but not nearly as much. Number 4, Sammy Watkins, for the reasons you mentioned. Wide receiver from Clemson. We all know who he is. Explosive, the playmaker, can be used multifaceted. Will drop an occasional pass, but it's a minor issue compared to his overall skill set. Did well even with Tosh Boyd, who struggled this year at Clemson. And then number 5, this is probably a little...
Struggled's putting it nicely.
Number 5, though, is Eric Ebron. That's probably a little bit of a stretch, but I just love the big move tight ends that have become so popular in today's NFL. Guys that can stretch the field vertically. Sure, he's not the best blocker in the world, but, when you have that size at 245, you can at least down block and just use your size to kind of get in the way. And I hate that people say, he can't block. These big move tight ends that weren't asked to block. People say, oh, well, he can't block. Maybe he can block. They just never asked him to block because they always had him up, in the slot, never with his hand down. It's not like, it's a huge, it's a big task, but it's not like it's insurmountable to be able to block and at least down block. And basically anyone can do that to use your size and get in the way. Maybe you won't be a great base blocker the way that Heath Miller or Matt Spaeth might be, but you can at least be enough of a blocker and contribute enough there that it won't hinder you that much as a team. So those are my top 5. Clowney, Mac, Bortles, Watkins, and Eric Ebron.
And then just to go over my top 5 again, Clowney, Jake Matthews, Sammy Watkins, Khalil Mack, and Mike Evans.
Okay, not used to talking this much. I had to drop stop and get some water there. All right, we'll skip to our top 5 prediction. We'll do that later. You want to go to Steelers Eagles now?
Let's go with that. Yeah.
All right. We'll start here with the Eagles first. I'll let you get on your soapbox, and you can take it away. You can look at positional needs and plays I might want to look at in the first round or later on. However you want to do it, hit me.
All right. Well, first, Alex, I do want to start with some breaking news for the Eagles today. For people that did not see it, the Eagles signed Alejandro Villanueva. He was a 4-year Army sergeant today. It's a rookie free agent deal. 6'9", 270, and he's an extremely raw talent. Obviously, was used in a bunch of different areas. He was used as an offensive lineman, then a defensive lineman, and then just got converted to wide receiver. So certainly, it will be a project for the Eagles to have in camp, which to me will be very, very interesting because the Eagles already have another big, tall wide receiver named Infami Moma, who's a 6'8" receiver who has been a practice squad body this year. Didn't have a really great preseason. He had some off-the-field issues. Didn't really perform that well. He had a ton of drops in training camp and in preseason games. I really wasn't a big a fan of him, but I know if the coaching staff is able to work out what he can do, then he'll be a big threat for the Eagles to have. But if Moma can't get his act together and this kid Villanueva comes in and makes some magic happen as a 6'9" receiver with incredible size, you could see him possibly make some noise in trying to make this roster when it comes later on in the preseason. So he's going to be a name to look out for. But let me get to some of my other needs for the Eagles. I really did not project myself in saying this would be the number one target. I was expecting to have mostly defensive, which I still do, but it's not at the top because of what happened with Deshaun Jackson. And it's extremely frustrating for not to bring the Deshaun Jackson thing in, but it's frustrating for me as an Eagle fan and all of Philadelphia to having to say that because the Eagles had that person, but we can talk about that another time. So I have receiver 1, and I think the Eagles in the first round will take care of that. I know it's going to aggravate a lot of Eagle fans, and it kind of aggravates me to some degree, but to me it's still the smart move because you have such a deep receiver class. Might as well just go get it now, get it out of the way, and get somebody that can replace or attempt to replace what Deshaun Jackson did. So I have receiver number 1. Number 2, I have outside linebacker and defensive end as 2 and 3 because the Eagles need an edge rusher. That was probably the biggest Achilles heel and an extremely improved defense last year. The Eagles were very good, but that was probably the most intriguing mishap that the Eagles had this year. And then 4th, it's not a whole dire need right now, but I have inside linebacker because I mentioned during our TV draft show that D'Amico Ryans, he's been the heart and soul of the defense. He's played extremely well since the Eagles got him in the trade with the Texans a couple of years ago. Obviously, he's played in the 3-4 system when he was with the Texans, but he's not getting any younger. And he showed some signs of slowing down last year, so the Eagles need to start adding some depth. I think a guy that would be really good to fit that would be C.J. Mosley, inside linebacker from Alabama. Cornerback safety, I won't be surprised if the Eagles address that too. They can definitely use some depth, but I don't think it's as dire a need as it is after what they saw in free agency. I know a lot of people in the Philadelphia media are absolutely condemning Michael Jenkins, but I actually really like that signing. I think he's a good playmaker, has a good nose for the football. He's a good hard tackler, hard hitter in general. So I really like what he can do. I think the Eagles' secondary is in better shape than what people think. Nate Allen was signed to a 1-year deal in the offseason. I think he'll be a better backup than he will starter. He did play well as a starter last year for the games he was in and out. So I think they'll be fine there. Cornerback, I love what Bradley Fletcher and Kerry Williams did last year. Brandon Boykin's an emerging star in the league after the season that he had staying in the nickel. It frustrates me that Chip Kelly won't put him to the outside, but he wants to stick him still in the nickel. So maybe we'll see if the season goes along. They might move him out there. But I would say if you're going to pick the 2, cornerback would be a good spot to help out with. I know Kyle Fuller is being projected now to go to the Eagles. His draft stock is rising. But I don't think that's a good move for the Eagles to go with position-wise in the first round. But I guess we'll have to see how the way everything will shape out. Because I think in this draft it's going to be really unpredictable to see how that goes. So that could be a value pick, which I wouldn't be going crazy over wanting to burn down the NovaCare complex about. But I don't think it's really necessary for the first round. So that's my thoughts on the Eagles right now. Projected pick, if they stay at 22, Marquise Lee, receiver from USC. Chip Kelly obviously loves to pick Pac-12 players that burned him offensively when he was the coach at Oregon. Reason why you see Matt Barkley on the team. Reason why you see Mark Sanchez on the team, which is a little desperate if you ask me, but he's a backup now. And the reason why the Nick Foles is the starting quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles. But I think there's one big move left, and we've seen a lot of bold moves from the Eagles so far under Chip Kelly, and for the majority, it has worked. Mm-hmm. So I think you're going to see one big move out of the Eagles. They will not go quietly as the offseason comes down to a close with the draft. And I think they're going to trade up somehow, some way, and get Mike Evans from wide receiver from Texas A&M. Because Chip Kelly, yes, he loves little gadgets, like an Odell Beckham Jr. for an example. That won't surprise me. There was a report out there, Alex, you and I just saw before we started recording this, that the Eagles are looking to trade up to get him. But Chip Kelly loves big and tall receivers, and which is the reason why they brought in this Villanueva kid today from the Army. So I think you might see the Eagles go up and get him. I know it hasn't really been reported that much, but I think Chip Kelly loves to keep some things up his sleeve, and so does Howie Roseman. So I think you could see that. I know they only have six draft picks in general, and this may still tick off a lot of Eagle fans too. But I personally would be okay with it because they're filling a void that they knew that they were going to be leaving by getting rid of Deshaun Jackson. That's really my big thing. If you're going to go receiver in the first round, get somebody worthwhile that will replace Deshaun Jackson. Mm-hmm. And I think the Eagles will do that with some of these picks. I think Marquise Lee would do it. I think Odell Beckham would do it. I'd have to solidify that by actually watching him. I haven't been able to watch tape on him yet. But from the LSU games that I saw this year, I would agree with Mike Evans.
Wow, you can talk a lot.
Yeah, sorry.
That was one breath. I was not drinking water in between. That's impressive.
But now I will.
A lot. let me give you one thought, and then let me ask you a two-part question.
Okay.
Just with the receiver, the 6'9" guy that they signed. First of all, it's a lot of talk about having a mouthful of names there with these big kids. What's their names again? There's one that's 6'8" that's been on the
6'8" is Efami Momba.
And then the kid they just signed,
Alejandro Villanueva.
Good Lord, that's a spelling bee winner right there. Again, fans love to get enamored with these tall receivers, and they can be fun to look at. But when you're that tall, again, separation as you stiff this in the hips. Big concern. The Steelers always used to do this. They always bring in one really tall receiver. Matt Catrillo, for Steelers fans, remember him in camp, who was 6'6", from Michigan State. Michael Rucker, who was 6'7". Neither of them ever really made much noise at all. Walter Young, who was shorter but still 6'4". So the tall guys are fun to look at. They're fun to talk about, but rarely do they pan out.
And that's the problem you're seeing with Moma. He's got no separation, really, I don't think, any athletic ability whatsoever. No size, weight-wise, so he's kind of like a twig trying to throw the ball up to, for lack of a better term. But
although the Army guy 277, so he's
I'm really intrigued with what this kid Villanueva might be able to do in camp.
But rarely do they get past that intrigue point. But anyway, getting back to the draft here, two-part question, and I'll start with this one: is why Marquise Lee?
Just because of the Pac-12 factor. He had a couple huge games against Oregon. I think he's a good down-the-field threat. He's an extremely great route runner, especially running inside routes. He will go in and make those tight. If you're dealing with a quarterback that likes to fit in the tight window, he'll make that catch. I love his hands. I think Marquise Lee may have the second best hands of the guys that I've watched in this draft.
Who's first?
Mike Evans is first.
Okay.
And his overall athletic ability to make those tough catches, he always made great effort in all the games that I watched to get 2 feet in bounds, knowing that's what you're going to have to do in the league. College, you only need 1 foot to get in bounds. And there was one particular touchdown catch, I believe it was against Notre Dame. I'd have to look that up. I don't have it in front of me. But he had a catch. It was in the front corner of the end zone. It was really tight coverage, but a nicely thrown ball. And he was able to catch it and just got the second foot in, too, and both feet in to make the catch. So that's what I love about receivers. If they make that big of an effort to, first of all, make the catch, but then be able to make sure they have 2 feet in bounds and et cetera, that's, to me, is a big plus. And I think you would definitely, if you're Chip Kelly, you definitely have to love that.
Now, my second part to that question is we know that the wide receiver is probably the deepest class that there is in this year's draft. Even with there being a need, you say, for the Eagles, how do you evaluate that in the sense of you want a receiver in the first round, but you could also have the option of waiting to the second round and still get somebody comparable to Marquise Lee? How do you go about deciding let's take one in the first round instead?
I think it's really because of the Deshaun Jackson factor. I think he was that electric for the offense, and I think he was a pretty big reason why the Eagles were the number one rushing team in the league, because defenses really couldn't have that ability unless they had a tremendous secondary to load 8 guys in the box and try and shut down LaShawn McCoy and the rest of the Eagles running backs, because you had to deal with Deshaun Jackson. Now, granted, there are other weapons on the team that have speed, like Zach Ertz, for example. The Eagles are getting Jeremy Maclin back this year. Mm-hmm. So that could in a way play a factor in the Eagles being a top rushing team next year. But Deshaun Jackson had, because of his speed and athletic ability, such a dangerous down the field threat. It was a main reason why the Eagles were running all over teams last year.
And I primarily asked that because somebody asked Kevin Colbert today in the Steelers pre-draft press conference, how does he handle that too? And he really answered, you just have to look at the talent. And if there's a guy there you want to take, you take him. You don't wait and try to get somebody comparable to him. Last question for the Eagles now before we jump to the Steelers again. Football Friday podcast, Alex Kozora with me is Matt Catrillo. You've mentioned Marquise Lee is your pick as of right now. You mentioned C.J. Mosley, potential for an Odell Beckham Jr. or a Mike Evans. Any other names out there that might make sense? You're projecting, but just names that you've heard or that might make sense in your mind. Just give me some more names out there if you have any for me.
I would probably say Kyle Fuller. I'd have to watch him on tape, but I know just recently he's starting to get linked to the Eagles. Again, I don't think quarterback is the position that the Eagles should go with in the first round, but second round on down, I think it will definitely be a position to look for just to add some depth to the Eagles roster right now. So I think he would be a name. I don't have much to say about him because I haven't watched him on tape. I really don't want to say that unless I watch him. But I would probably definitely say Kyle Fuller for sure.
Fuller, Mike Mayock's #1 corner, a guy that he's been a big fan of for a long time, and has also been linked to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And speaking of the Steelers, we'll go to them now. And I'll first address some of the needs, and they're not going to change from where we were at when we talked about it on our draft show for the TV station. The biggest need for me is defensive end right now. There is not another defensive end on this team outside of Cam Hayward. The only other option right now is Cam Thomas, who was signed from the San Diego Chargers in free agency, and he's really a one-tech. He played some five-tech later in the year after he got benched. Tomlin said today that he's nose tackle capable, that he's defensive end capable, but really at his core, he's a nose tackle. And will he play some end? Yes, he'll probably rotate, both positions, but he should not be an every down starter. And then you have Brian Arnfelt and Nick Williams, guys that are really young and really raw. Williams, who hadn't played at all in the regular season. Arnfelt, who played 2 snaps. So after losing Al Woods and Ziggy Hood and Brett Kiesel being a free agent, the team did leave the possibility of bringing him back open today at the press conference. But it certainly was not an encouraging sign that he's going to come back, Kiesel. Even after all the cap space relief that you get after June 1st, because of the Lamar Woodley release, and there goes my phone. So if you hear that, that was just my phone. So defensive end is a huge need for the team right now. Inside linebacker, I'm a big Vince Williams fan. I was encouraged by his play last year, but you still see that as a need. Depth is still very weak. Arthur Motes has been told he'll get first crack at outside linebacker. You don't know what you're going to get from Sean Spence. Tomlin called him healthy and ready to work today, but I think anything you get from Sean Spence is going to be considered a bonus. Wide receiver, we've all talked about that, depending on how much trust you have in Marcus Wheaton. Lance Moore was signed, but he's, of course, 31 years old. And then tight end, I'm a big fan of getting that move tight end. It doesn't seem likely, and we'll get to that in a little bit, but I'd like to have another move tight end that gives you that versatility on offense to go 12 personnel and still have that big receiving threat at tight end. Just to recap, probably the biggest thing that Kevin Colbert said today in the Steelers pre-draft press conference is that the team will not trade up, but trading down is a, quote, real possibility. They don't have the firepower to trade up because of last year's trade, getting rid of the third-round pick to go acquire Shamarko Thomas. The team is not interested in trading up, but trading down is a possibility. So that was really the biggest news, I guess, to come out of today, because, of course, they didn't really say much at all, and why would they? So just that one tidbit there. Just real quick, at the Steelers' needs, Matt, you agree, you disagree? Defensive end, inside linebacker, wide receiver, tight end, before we get into the players.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree, Alex. And actually, that's one thing in common that both Pennsylvania teams have as a need, is having that edge pass rusher. And to me, that really hurt the Steelers, too, this year. I mean, because they were, as always, they were pretty good against the run. And if they had that edge pass rusher, I think the defense could have been so much better. Inside linebacker, definitely for sure. They have a lot of aging players. So I definitely agree with that. Receiver can be definitely better. Tight end, Heath Miller, such a great receiver when healthy. And a very good blocker, too. He's been great for the Steelers for so long. But again, injuries are a concern for him, too. So, and also, too, the Steelers really have never had a 1-2 punch at tight end. And I know you're a big fan of that. And I think that would add more to the Steelers' offense and definitely help them out with the running game that's been lacking the last couple of years, but is getting better with the year that LaDavion Bell had this year. So I would definitely agree with you there with all the needs for the Steelers.
Yeah, I mean, you said edge rusher and outside linebacker really isn't a need, but defensive end, that position is evolving. And if the Steelers want to play sub-package football as much as they did last year, which was 60% of the time, your defensive end skill set's going to change from guys that are going to be really stout against the run but won't offer much as a pass rusher to guys that can get after the quarterback. And that's what Tomlin said today. He's absolutely right about it. You need guys like Cam Hayward that can collapse the pocket and be a threat to the pass rusher if you're going to be playing so much sub-package football. And it really, really stresses them, too, even against the run. Because if you're running nickel and you have 2 down linemen, that makes your running defense that much harder and puts a lot of responsibility on the 2 big guys that you have to do their job. So defensive end is such a big need for the Steelers right now.
And really, Alex, to me, it's been a very disappointing offseason for the Steelers because they they haven't. To me, they really didn't bring that great of an effort in trying to bring some of their top defensive guys back, like Ziggy Hood, for example. I think that was a really huge loss for this team. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, but I think this is an extremely important draft overall for the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially with the way when you look at the AFC North as a whole, where all these teams are at right now. Cincinnati, to me, I think still is the best team in the division, but once they get into the playoffs, they're a no-show. You saw that again last year. I mean, losing that kind of a game to the San Diego Chargers was a horrendous game last year. Cleveland is always rebuilding. They're always a mess. We'll see what they can do this year. If they draft well, which is a pretty big if, especially a receiver, they can emerge as maybe having one of the best receiving corps in all the league with some of the guys that they have right now. But we'll see what they do there. Quarterback's obviously a big question too, but that's a good defense that they have as well. Baltimore, they're rebuilding a little bit, but they're not that far away from being back to a playoff contender. So if the Steelers are going to try anyway and get themselves back as being a playoff team or even a division champion, now's the year to have a big draft and kind of get themselves back going, especially with all the players that they just lost.
Well, I mean, and I've told you this before, Matt, is I don't really look at it in those terms of this is the time to compete for the AFC North, because regardless of what other teams are doing, the main goal for the Steelers will always be and has always been to win the AFC North and to be a Super Bowl contender. So I don't care what other teams are doing right now. You approach it the same every single year, and I believe that's what the Steelers are going to be doing, because that's the right approach to have. I was actually, it was unfortunate to lose what they did in free agency. Money is always an issue. Steelers don't have a ton of cap space.
Right, understood. But I just think that overall they needed to have had a little bit of a better effort to try and keep some of those players.
I thought they were, and they might have, and maybe they couldn't get guys to come back. I mean, do you blame Jacob Cotchery for going to become a number 1 or number 2 wide receiver in Carolina? No, I don't do that at all. Ziggy Hood for going back to his natural position of defensive tackle and playing for a guy like Gus Bradley? No, I don't blame him for that. Al Woods, who got decent money, relatively speaking, in Tennessee. Do you blame him for chasing more money? No, I don't. And I thought we were really aggressive in free agency, more so than we have been in the last couple of years. You go out and sign Mike Mitchell from out of nowhere early in free agency. You get Lance Moore, Hayward Bay, which of course is just a flyer, but still, another body there who's got NFL experience. Arthur Moats, who's got position versatility, play inside or outside. A guy like Bryce McCain, Adam Podlesh, a punter. So they were actually pretty active in free agency by the Steelers' standards, in my opinion. So, I mean, you lost a lot, but you did make some effort to bring guys in, and I can appreciate that for a team that's usually pretty quiet.
Right, and I like the Mike Mitchell signing. He was actually rumored to go to the Eagles when free agency started. And I think he's a solid signing. But again, you have a couple of guys like Hayward Bay, for example, that will be projects, and they may not even make the team,
yeah.
But I don't know. I just really would have liked to have seen them, like all that effort they put into bringing in all those players. I think that they needed to do that.
Well, they may have, and it may have not worked out. We'll never really know for sure. On now to who I will mock them, and I've gone back and forth on this so much, Matt. And I really don't even know. I still really don't know, to be honest. I'm going to sit down for Depot, and I still have a full first round mock to do, and then the Steelers 7-round mock. I've done 2 so far. We'll do a third one before Thursday's draft. I really don't know for sure. It's a really difficult spot at pick 15. I'll give you somebody had asked me. Hopefully I can pronounce his name right, because I wrote on Twitter anyone who had any questions that they would like to have us discuss. To send them in and we'll talk about it on this podcast. And Stefan Crankary, I hope I pronounced that right, Crankary, had asked just Kevin Colbert today said there's like 19 players that would make a lot of sense at pick 15. And it just speaks to the depth of this class. So Stefan, I'm not sure which. Again, I apologize. I know I butchered your name horribly. But anyway, give a list of players that make some sense, that are good fits. Even if I agree with them or disagree with them, not really the point. Just players that could fit their names that are options. So I'll give you a list, no particular order. I'll give you a list of 7, and then I guess I'll make my pick off of that. And again, no particular order. Eric Ebron, the tight end from North Carolina. Again, make your offense multiple. You can run a lot more 12 personnel. Instead of having Matt Spaeth, and now you have Ebron, so teams can't try to blow the box against you, and it's harder to predict against the run. You can have Ebron standing up if you want to. I've talked about it before. Just the versatility that you get on offense, which is the key for any offense, of coordinator. is to make the defense have to prepare for multiple elements. Makes them put in a lot more work and makes your offense less predictable. Unlikely for that to happen. The Steelers have not shown much interest in bringing in tight ends. They've only worked out one tight end, Rob Blanchflower from Massachusetts, was the only one that they brought in. So probably not going to happen until the late rounds, but a guy can dream. Number 2, Justin Gilbert from Oklahoma State, the corner. Just watched him. Big fan of him. A lot of bulk. Great lower body strength. Very explosive. Can click and close. People knock him for not being very physical and not being a good tackler. I did not see that in the 5 games that I watched of him. I think he is physical, seeks contact, will get his nose dirty, and packs a good punch. And then he's a ball hawk, 7 interceptions, return value as well, 4-year return man for the Cowboys. Dangerous in the open field, interceptions, and in the return game. And lots of starting experience, too, for Justin Gilbert. So a big fan of him. Odell Beckham Jr. from LSU, the wide receiver. Steeler fans, they want these tall wide receivers. They want guys that are 6'4", 6'5". We're not going to have that with Beckham, who's under 6 foot, but explosive. Scotty Montgomery, the old wide receivers coach, would say the phrase "quick to the tuck" for receivers. That means catch the ball and get upfield. I'll use a similar phrase and say pluck and tuck. He's a guy that catches away from his body, that helps his catch radius, can get upfield. And accelerate. Very explosive wide receiver. And also, I think he's an elite return man. He might not be an elite receiver, but I think you're going to get an elite return man who can be your starting kick returner from day one. Guy that had a 100-yard field goal miss return for a touchdown against UAB, for example. So, I do like Odell Beckham. Aaron Donald, I don't think he will last at 15, and he might be best as a one-gapper, but I think he can play 5-tech. He did that his sophomore year at Pitt. He started 5 games at 5-tech. And has above average length for his height, which is a big thing to look at, not height but arm length for a guy at 5-tech. I think, again, you talk about guys that are pass rush capable, that's Aaron Donald. I think 52.7% of his tackles in his Pitt career went for either a tackle for a loss or a sack. So over half, just to kind of put that in a nutshell for Aaron Donald. Kyle Fuller is my 5th from Virginia Tech. You guys played with Frank Beamer, Mike Mayock's number 1 cornerback. He's the cornerback class is really crazy. It's all over the place depending on who you talk to, but he's going to be an option as well. Number 6, C.J. Mosley, against linebacker from Alabama. Nothing too flashy with him, but very few flaws. Extremely consistent. I think he's very smart. Takes really good angles to the ball to kind of make up for the lack of speed that he has. Strong. Does a pretty good job to get off blocks. He can get stuck sometimes and kind of washed, but a formed tackler, vicious. Very, very rarely will he miss a tackle, and I don't know if this is really the correct phrasing for it, but I think he's got a big tackle radius. He's so strong. If he's in the vicinity, he's going to be able to trip you up or wrap you up. So a strong, reliable tackler, C.J. Mosley. And then number 7, Kelvin Benjamin. The reports from early in the offseason, the Steelers wanted to get Ben Roethlisberger, a big wide receiver. Of course, Benjamin at 6'5". Who can high point the football, coming off that big championship game with a game-winning touchdown catch. I think he's got some drop issues, separation issues. He had 11 drops by my count this past year, but he could be in play too. The 15 could be a little too high. So I guess for my final pick, if I had to choose one, and again, it's gone back and forth so much, it's tough for me to decide. I'm going to go with Odell Beckham Jr., though. And I was encouraged by Marcus Wheaton's play because of all the injuries that he had that was setting him back. But you can never have enough weapons. And again, you're talking about a guy that's a really good wide receiver and an elite return man, extremely dangerous. And Beckham, that explosiveness that he has, I think he's got good body control, pretty good catcher, soft hands. So I like Odell Beckham Jr. from LSU as of right now as my pick. My number 2. I guess it'd be Justin Gilbert, but I just don't see cornerback as one being a huge need. I think people overstate the need the cornerback is for the Steelers. They have 4 in Ike Taylor, Cortez Allen, William Gay, and Shamarko Thomas. And then from a precedent standpoint, it's not there. 3 cornerbacks the team has taken in the first round since 1979. Kevin Colbert's never taken a cornerback in the first round. It's not a position they value as much. They don't ask you to be shut down man-to-man ball hawks that usually you get in the first round. It's about being physical, reliable tackler, being able to support the run, you can get those guys later rounds, and we'll talk about that later in the podcast about who some of those guys might be. But I just don't see cornerback as a huge need.
Yeah, I mean, I think it always gets overblown, Alex. I mean, Ike Taylor, sure, he's had his couple misplays here and there, but everybody does. And I think he's been extremely solid for the Steelers. I think William Gay's a pretty good talent. I know he gets trashed all the time by Steeler fans. And also, too, Shamarko Thomas, like you mentioned before, the Steelers gave up a lot for him. And I think there's more for him to show next year now that he's been through 1 year. I think he's going to have more of a role in that secondary next year for the Steelers. So yeah, I definitely would agree with you there. I think it's a solid. Odell Beckham Jr. Alex is a very solid pick for the Steelers because I think if they haven't had a big play threat really since Mike Wallace left. So if they were to draft this guy, you would talk about a guy that has tremendous speed, that can stretch the field, and then that would open up their running game again. I think a little bit, which has been lacking, and Bell has really shown some good flashes last year as long as he can stay healthy. So I think if they were to try and get a guy like Odell Beckham Jr. for an example, a guy that can stretch the field, it can open up so many more things for their offense next year.
Well, I disagree. I think Antonio Brown is a fantastic playmaker. Might be a little different than Mike Wallace because he doesn't have the vertical capability that Mike Wallace has. But he's a playmaker, if you ask me. I think Beckham is similar in that.
Right, but let me just correct that. Yeah, I do agree. Antonio Brown is a very good receiver, and he was great for the offense. But I think Beckham Jr. is a little bit faster.
Yeah, maybe
from what I've seen again. And again, this is me going off not seeing a game of him on tape, but from what I've seen in game action, from watching all the games this year at LSU, I would agree to that. But even so, he would still add more to the offense. And I think if you have two guys like that, you add Beckham Jr. to what you already have with Antonio Brown. Again, it would open up the offense, especially the running game, and you'd see the Steelers maybe go back to some of the old Steelers football, running the football effectively.
Well, I'm not a fan of that. I think those are just old, archaic, cliche terms. But anyway, I mean, yeah, I think there's some comparison there with Antonio Brown. I think they're not too dissimilar. And people say you gotta have guys that complement each other. You gotta have one big tall guy and one short, faster guy. I don't buy into that at all. Just give me talent. Give me guys that are gonna win you football games. I don't care what size you are. I don't care what your skill set is. If they complement, if they're the same, it doesn't matter to me. If Odell Beckham Jr., if you told me he's going to be the next Antonio Brown and a borderline number one wide receiver and a number one wide receiver in my eyes, I'm taking him. I don't care if he's not 6'5". Who cares? If he can play, he can play. If you put the blinders on so much and just focus on guys that are 6'4" or taller, you're going to miss out on some really good prospects.
I totally agree.
And Odell Beckham Jr. is one of them.
Yeah, I love him too. And if I know he's been linked to the Eagles too, I would love if the Eagles got him too. I really love what he can do. Again, you want guys in the NFL in a passing league that can stretch the field and that will be versatile and capable big play go-to threats.
And if he doesn't start at wide receiver day one because there's that tough transition, he's going to be a starting return man at day one. He's going to give you value on special teams right away.
And special teams, as we know, Alex, can change the outcome of a game or change the momentum of a game, be a turning point. And the Steelers can use some help along with Antonio Brown, of course.
Yeah.
He's been the primary punt returner. I think I would see probably Odell Beckham Jr. serving as a kick returner possibly, but or trading off with Antonio Brown. But still, he'd be another added weapon on special teams too.
And another reason why I like Justin Gilbert, he's a return man, 6 career kickoff returns for touchdowns in his career for Justin Gilbert. But we'll take a short break here. We're going to pause on the Football Friday podcast. We'll come back, and then we'll get into actual draft talk, positions, sleepers, what classes are strong week, all that and more here on the Football Friday podcast. And welcome back to the Football Friday podcast. Alex Kozora, Matt Catrillo. Almost an hour we've gone through already talking about draft. Hopefully you guys are still listening. And if you are, hey, I appreciate it. You listen to us ramble on for much longer than what you probably should.
I love it.
One other quick note on the Steelers I meant to get to. Someone else had asked a question on Twitter if I thought that Kyle Fuller was going to last in the second round of the Steelers. And it's possible, but I would definitely lean towards no. I just say it's possible because of how deep this cornerback class is. But let's say hypothetically there is a run on cornerbacks in that mid-late first round that's going to push Fuller up. Like we're talking about the age that you got to have depth at cornerback. You can't have just two starters anymore. You have to be able to go nickel and really dime at this point. So the importance and the value of cornerback has shot up so much. So I don't expect Kyle Fuller to last into the second round for the Steelers. If you want him, you're going to have to trade back, either take him at 15 or trade back into the later first round. He probably won't be there at the second round for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Well, I mean, overall, Alex, you're talking about a guy whose draft stock is rising and rising as we're talking. I think he's probably going to end up going late first round, but we'll see what happens. I mean, what makes this year's draft probably is going to be really unique is the flow of how the draft might go is just so unpredictable. It's probably the most unpredictable that I think we're ever going to see.
Yeah, I didn't know you were done talking there. Usually I get the long Shakespearean type answer, so I wasn't expecting that.
I'll take that as a compliment.
That's how you want to take it. Feel free. I don't see Fuller actually leaving the top 25. I think he probably goes before then if you made me have to answer it. So the short answer, no, I don't see Kyle Fuller lasting into the second round. So moving on now into just the nitty-gritty with the draft talk on the Football Friday podcast. I have 3 positions listed here, Matt. We can talk about more, we will. But just to start us off, we have quarterbacks, wide receivers, and cornerbacks. So I'm going to ask you, Matt, what position would you like to start with? Again, quarterback.
Let's start with the quarterback.
At the quarterbacks? Okay, I'll let you kick it off, too. I mean, you can frame this however you want to. Kevin Colbert today in his press conference, he just kept talking about the quarterback class for a team that's certainly not in the hunt for a first-round quarterback, but it's, he called it the linchpin of how trades are going to, shape up and things like that. Who's going to try to move, what guys are going to fall. You talk about how unpredictable this draft as a whole is. A lot of it's because of that quarterback, and projections have changed so much, and you have 8 to 9 quarterbacks that could go within the first 2 rounds or are being rumored and projected to do so. Really unpredictable, like you said. So, I don't know how you want to start this, Matt.
Well, first of all, Alex, I must say this is the most scrutinized quarterback class I think we're ever going to see. I mean, in particular, the big 3 of Teddy Bridgewater, Johnny Manziel, and Blake Bortles, and those are the only 3 quarterbacks that I've watched so far. And Derek Carr certainly another interesting name that his stock is rising to, even into the top 5, which, again, without having watched him, I think would be a little bit of a stretch. But you never know. We'll see what happens. But my top quarterback, Alex, I know you and I have a lot of disagreements with how this is going to go. I have Teddy Bridgewater as my number 1 overall quarterback, then Blake Bortles, and then Johnny Manziel out of the 3 that I've watched. With Bridgewater, mechanics are excellent. Tremendous poise under pressure, in and out of the pocket. And I think that's really what I like about him the most. I like quarterbacks that aren't going to panic, that aren't going to turn the football over and try and throw the ball or make reckless plays. After pretty much after watching Michael Vick for 3.5 years, actually, as an Eagle fan, I just like guys that are under control, aren't going to turn the ball over, show some good leadership, and get people down the field, but can obviously make plays when needed to. Very dangerous and elusive when he gets out of the pocket. He does especially a very good job in squaring his shoulders, throwing the ball on the run. I think he does that the best out of any quarterback that I've seen in this draft. As I mentioned, very smart with the ball as well. And I haven't projected in the top 5. I haven't in my actual top 5. I have him just outside at number 6, just because of the other talent that's in this draft. But I haven't just a little teaser for later. I do have him projected in the top 5. Second, let's go to Blake Bortles. I know you and I have some disagreements on Blake Bortles, and then we'll get to good old Johnny football.
Yeah, I never understood why you don't like Blake Bortles, because you have yet to give me a legitimate reason to not like. If you don't like Blake Bortles, that's fine, but I have yet to hear a legitimate.
It's not that I don't like him. I mean, all the mechanics are there. Good athletic ability. He is a threat to run when outside the pocket, but again, doesn't have blazing speed. So
why are we talking about speed with the first thing with Blake Bortles? Well, that's your first mistake.
I'm getting there. Arm is good, not great, like you mentioned before. I think Bridgewater's arm's actually, and maybe even Manziel's a little bit better, to be honest.
With Bridgewater, I would disagree. Manziel, you can debate it, but I think Bortles got a better arm than Bridgewater. I think that's actually one of Bridgewater's main deficiencies is velocity on his football. I think the ball kind of wobbles a little bit, doesn't drive it as well as he should.
Yeah. He does have a tendency to throw the ball high. He does have some forced unnecessary throws. However, he can fit the ball into tight windows, but it's not always consistent. He kind of reminds me of a white Donovan McNabb, a guy again that had some speed, and was a threat to run, decent arm but not great. Tendency to throw the ball high is actually where I got that in there. But obviously,
I don't see McNabb. McNabb in his early days.
He's McNabb in his early days.
Way
yeah,
more elusive.
I guess then Donovan McNabb earlier, or excuse me, later in his career, is where I would kind of compare him to. To me, he just kind of lacks that it factor overall. That's my biggest thing.
Define that for me.
A guy that can just make plays. A guy that
he did. 64% of his passes were completed. His team was successful.
Right. You're right.
One of the most successful seasons Central Florida has had.
Right, but again, this is Central Florida we're talking about here.
Still, it doesn't matter. It's still a fantastic season.
I know. I'm not trying to take anything away from him there. Let me go to South Carolina game for an example. He had a ton of misfires. Had a forced throw that led to an interception. His eyes were easily read by the defender. I think that's another big thing here.
We can cherry pick particular games. We can do that with any quarterback. We can do that with Bridgewater, Manziel. You pick any prospect. You can cherry pick individual games. I'm not sure if there's one subpar game against South Carolina that takes away an it factor from him.
Well, let me go further. The Fiesta Bowl. Overthrew a receiver for an interception. Had a lot of high throws in that game. And that's the biggest game that he'll play in his college ball career. Obviously, I know jitters had maybe a little bit of a factor early, but even in that game a little bit further on, he still had a couple of those throws. Against Penn State, he underthrew a wide-open receiver that led to a pass breakup. Had a forced throw leading to an interception. He was decent under pressure, but not great. Overall, he's solid. Don't get me wrong. He had a very good year with Baylor last year, but I'm just not seeing the hype that other people have with him, including you.
I look at a guy, and people say he's a developmental guy. I really don't see what all he had. There's still some development. The eyes and feet are not always synced up. And yes, there's a little bit of inconsistency sometimes with his accuracy. I think some passes float to the sideline. I think he's got to really work on driving the football on your out routes and comebacks and things of that nature, throwing to the wide side of the field. But a guy, like I said, that has the size, has a good arm, was successful. I like his pocket presence. He can slide, step. I think he stands tall in the pocket. He's got a lot of toughness, a little bit of athleticism. Size can be tough to bring down. Not Ben Roethlisberger. People get a misnomer to call him Ben. But he's got a little bit of size, and he can be tough to be brought down. And a guy that isn't making waves. A quiet kid. Not Johnny Manziel. There's no really off-the-field issues or character or ego or whatever you want to call it with Bortles. An even-keeled kind of person. That has, good accuracy, and like I said, and everything else that I said about Blake Bortles. He's not an Andrew Luck or an RG3 to that extent, but I think people say he's a project. I think it's become a little bit of a crutch to call him that. I just, to be perfectly honest, I just don't see a whole ton of development. I think he's actually relatively close to being NFL ready. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, like I said, solid guy. I do agree he has very good pocket presence, strong arm, good footwork, accurate for the most part.
Accurate on the move as well. He's a guy that can square their shoulders. That Penn State game, that was one I think was Glenn Carson bearing down on him, and he ends up throwing a great flag route down the left sideline. There was a 3rd and 8 play with pressure on an out route that he was able to complete against Penn State with UCF in the lead in that game. So I'm a big fan of Blake Bortles. He's my number one quarterback, but I know we'll agree to disagree on that one, I suppose. All right, so you got Bridgewater 1, right?
Right, Bridgewater 1, Bortles 2, Manziel 3.
Manziel 3. Now, why? Okay, you're not a fan of Johnny Manziel. We'll get that out.
Not at all.
Right
not at all.
Why is he number 3 for you then? If you
as 3 isn't dead last because of these are the only quarterbacks that I've watched.
Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about Johnny Manziel then.
If I watched other quarterbacks, I would probably say that he would probably have gone down.
And just real quick as an aside, I just real quick made a list of quarterbacks that have been at least mentioned as going, a top, day 2 pick somewhere in those first 2 rounds, day 3 as well. And I have 11. And maybe it's a tiny bit stretching a couple of these guys, but not by much. And in no particular order, Manziel, Bortles, Bridgewater, Derek Carr, trying to read my own handwriting here, Jimmy Garoppolo, Tom Savage, Zach Mettenberger, A.J. McCarron, Aaron Murray, Garrett Gilbert,
You put me down for my handwriting.
Yeah, I know. It's just me writing it down really, really. Oh, I'm trying to read his last name. Wow, that's annoying. But there's so many quarterbacks in this draft class. A guy like Tom Savage is just not he's rocking him. He's not really rocking him because that's not the way it works. The media is just learning about him now. But a guy that started this draft process as a late round flyer who now could go, in late first, possibly early second. I mean, there are so many good quarterbacks in this class, and that separation between the first tier and the second tier and the third tier, really even, are not that far apart. That's what I really enjoy about this quarterback class is that it's really hard to evaluate.
I mean, again, you go back to the whole classes in general. I mean, it's just unbelievable how anybody can go anywhere. You talk about a guy like Tom Savage. I mean, again, not having had watched a game of him, but that can possibly go as early as the second round.
Yeah,
and it's just unbelievable. But
let's go back though to Johnny Manziel.
All right.
We'll probably yell at each other about this. Even though we share a similar opinion, but for whatever reason, we always end up yelling about Johnny Manziel.
I mean, he has the track record of a Michael Vick, although Michael Vick is a much better quarterback, I think, than him. Tendencies to do just way too much. I mean, good. I'll start with the positives, I guess. Good pocket presence and a strong arm. I will say that. Mm-hmm. But, again, has a high release, which costs himself and his receivers. He can throw it to only where his guy can get it. He can throw it to where his guy can go get it, which is a plus. But he constantly overthrows guys or puts guys in vulnerable positions to have to go up and make the catch and make plays. Running, scrambling, extremely reckless with the football. He carries the ball like a loaf of bread. Just overall, I mean, really, that's really my biggest problem with Johnny Manziel. You can say all you want on how talented he is and how electrifying of a player he can be. But we all base that knowledge and that understanding off of on tape, what he does. That stuff you see on tape, like the Duke game, for example, that particular play, you are never, ever going to see that in the NFL. And in fact, if he did that kind of a play in the NFL, he would most likely find himself on IR for the year.
I just think that we haven't seen a player that is capable of that. We didn't see that in college football until he did it in that game.
Michael Vick? He's probably the closest player we've seen to it, and he's only had one non-injury plagued season.
Yeah, but if you remember Michael Vick at his best and what he could have been, was the most dangerous players in the NFL.
Right.
So that when you try to evaluate and say what can Manziel be, he can be one of the most dangerous, electrifying players in the NFL.
But what did that get Michael Vick? Hurt every year. Not many playoff appearances.
I'm thinking just glass half full. And it's rare that you're the pessimistic one. I'm the optimistic one. But if you think glass half full, what he can be, just focus on that for a second. What he can be, electrifying, a playmaker, a guy that wins, a leader on the field, not off the field. But
I totally agree on the field. Yeah,
so no doubt about that. I'm not trying to focus on the negatives because I agree, and I will get to the negatives as well. But if you just look at a second and if you select him, you're saying what he can be. You're not saying what his floor is. You don't think in those terms. You think of what his ceiling is going to be. That's what it is, and that's what makes him so polarizing.
Right, and I get that. I mean, I see that on ESPN every day. And by the way, if he goes either number one or somewhere in the top 5 and ESPN is talking about him nonstop, I will literally change the channel to NFL Network. Just throwing that out there.
Fair enough.
But anyway, again, that's really the biggest thing. You can talk about that all you want, but until we see it, it's just not gonna happen. I mean, especially when you see defensive players nowadays in the NFL, bigger, stronger, faster, and really. And look at even Steve Young, if we want to even go back that far. Yeah, he won a Super Bowl, but
if Johnny Manziel turns into Steve Young, I'm a happy person if I'm the team drafting.
Of course that. I don't
know what your point is there.
He still was hurt and was reckless with the football and all that too.
But if I'm getting Steve Young, I mean,
I am not saying he's Steve Young. He's not even remotely close to being Steve Young because Steve Young was smart with the football. Manziel is not.
I mean, he's gotten some young comparisons. He's got a lot of Frank Tarkenton comparisons Manziel has. Here's with Manziel. Here's what I don't want to talk about with Johnny Manziel. We've heard it way too much, and I'm sick of it.
Me too.
No, not what specifically with Johnny Manziel.
Okay.
I want to talk about him, but there's two
Okay.
things I don't want to talk about with Johnny Manziel. One, his size. We get it. He's short. Not a secret to anyone.
That's not my biggest problem with him either.
I know. I'm not attacking you. I'm not telling you. Just from the people, because when I see on ESPN, when they talk about him, that's all they talk about. He's short. We get it. No one's surprised. People are like, oh, he didn't weigh in at the combine at 6 foot. He didn't cross that threshold. No one knew, and no one thought he was going to be tall. No one. It's obvious. Either you accept that and you keep on your board, or you take him off. The combine's not going to do anything.
Or you keep feeding him Wheaties and hopefully he grows.
Not gonna. Unlikely. It would seem unlikely. We're not sponsored by Wheaties either. I just, for the record, want to make sure that's clear. So we know he's short. That's not either you accept that or you don't. You move on. Not a point of discussion anymore. 2, the injury factor. I mean, I get it to an extent, but quarterback, it's a position where anyone can get hurt at any time. Nature of the position, nature of the game. So yes, does he compound that problem by being elusive and wanting to run with the football so much? Yes, some, but. Tom Brady got hurt in the pocket. Peyton Manning, severe neck injury, almost cut his career short. Can happen to anybody. So I don't like talking about either of those things.
But the only thing I will say is those two players you just mentioned, Brady and Manning, those were both one-time big serious injuries.
Yeah, but I'm saying it can happen. Any play, it can happen. If Manziel can get hurt standing in the pocket, he can get hurt scrambling. It can happen to any quarterback at any time. You never know.
Right, I understand. But to that point, though, when you see guys like Michael Vick, for example, or any other running quarterback we've seen in this league, you've seen multiple serious injuries.
I understand.
And but I'm saying too, I guess to keep going with this point, you can't have a franchise quarterback, quote unquote, or have a guy to count on for your future if he can't stay healthy.
I understand, but I'm just saying there's that risk. It's just an innate risk, and is it heightened by Manziel's style? Of course it is. But it's not going to scare me away because no matter who I draft, whatever quarterback I have, his career could end in a single play on any given play, and I could lose him forever. You're going to take that risk, and you hope for the best. You live in your hopes, and dreams, not your fears. And again, me being the optimistic one, which is a rare thing.
That is pretty rare.
Again, Football Friday podcast, Alex Kozora, Matt Catrillo. You can check me out, SteelersDepot.com. Again, I'll do the shameless plugging, so Matt, who's apparently my publicist anywhere I go, he's got to mention it to everybody.
Well, that's good stuff, man.
Yeah, well, thank you. Just submitted my 51st scouting report today. It'll go up tomorrow on Shaquille Richardson. Or tomorrow could mean today by the time this gets uploaded. But, 51, hopefully to do more. But thank you guys who have read them throughout the year, left feedback. Much appreciated. Going back to Manziel now. Here's what I do want to talk about his flaws. And I'll make them twofold. One, like you said, reckless with the football. You said carrying it like a loaf of bread outside of the pocket or running downfield the balls. It drops down to his hip. I've seen it drop down to his knee before. It's just really, really reckless. And you can try to coach that and tell him to tug the football away, but there's a muscle memory to it. There's an instinct to it, and those habits are really hard to break and take a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of willpower. So he didn't fumble a lot in college, but I think there's a fumble waiting to happen in the NFL, and that will
totally agree about that.
That will kill teams, and that will get you on the bench. That's a big concern. The other one, and people don't talk about this because they love to talk about his height and injury potential and stuff like that. Mechanically, he's a mess.
Oh, I totally agree with that too.
And that has a silver lining to it. I'll get to that in a second. But I think his lower half, his legs and his feet, it's a mess mechanically.
The way I compare it to as it's like a ballerina trying to throw the football.
I don't know what that means.
I mean, because he basically throws on his tippy toes. His footwork is awful.
Yeah, I know, but I never heard of
ballerina. I think I literally put throwing on his tippy toes.
I'm sure you did.
I'll have to try and find that exact game.
I'm sure you did. I'll let you do that. I'll talk to you for a second. One, I won't start with the lower half. Another issue of him dropping the ball on his hip whenever he does go to scramble, whenever he goes to throw, because that ball's at his hip, now he has to bring it up to his ear, it creates a wind-up. When he's in the pocket and the ball's high and tight to his chest, he's got a fairly quick release, but because he likes to scramble and drop that ball and drop his elbow, it creates a wind-up, which is problematic at the next level. Fractions of a second is what we're trying to make up for on Sundays. You can get away with that on Saturday, not on Sunday. Mechanically, as you put it, throwing on his tippy toes. Why is that? Because he locks up his front leg, and he doesn't derive power, and his passes can float because of it. Part of that could be a height thing as too, but I really see it as that front leg locking up, and that's why he gets on his tippy toes. I think he's got a narrow base, which is already problematic for a guy that isn't that big. You want to get as much power as you can. I think he's got poor weight transfer, getting from his back foot to his front foot, which again, you lose accuracy, you lose power on your throws. Again, eye and feet relationship. When you move your eyes, do your feet move with you, or is there a delay? I think there's a tape delay with Johnny Manziel to steal the phrase.
I like
it.
There. Nice.
The eyes go first, the feet go a moment later. Again, you can get away with that on Saturdays, but on Sunday you can't do that. Fractions of a second is what we're talking about. The difference between a completion and an interception.
By the way, the game that I found it was the Auburn game.
The Auburn game,
which he got hurt in, by the way. Not to bring the injury stuff back, but just saying.
I mean, no, the injury is a real issue, and I don't want to not recognize that as being an issue, but I don't see it as much because that's the nature of the position.
And I guess my other thing too, when we go back to is he coachable and stuff like that, I know that's a big concern with Manziel.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I will say, what makes him a great leader is he's not afraid to make a play, which obviously you want that in a quarterback. But sometimes he tries to use that toughness and that maybe perhaps overconfidence, cockiness against himself a lot.
Yeah.
When he tries to take on 270-pound linebackers and tries to run through them as a running back, and he gets crushed, like the Auburn game, for an example. And to me, the minute he does it in the NFL, again, I'm bringing Michael Vick back into this thing, but nonetheless, it makes my point. The play that I remember the most, I was actually at this game live. It was the home game in 2010. 2010 against the Washington Redskins. Michael Vick it was a goal line play. Vick was trying to run up the middle, got sandwiched by two guys, cracked ribs. He was out for 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And this Eagles still lost that game. They had to settle for a field goal on that drive.
There's no question Johnny Manziel trusts himself more than anybody else does. He trusts his game, he trusts in his ability, and sometimes it's too much. It's a good thing to have confidence, but sometimes it is too much. So the question that you brought up, and that's the million-dollar question, is how coachable is he? It goes to the character things that we really can't speak of because we don't know the answers to. We don't know the guy personally. Can you teach him, clean up his mechanics, teach him to carry the ball better and things like that? Or is he going to be a guy that's just going to, be instinctive and do his own thing and get himself in trouble too often, like a Michael Vick?
And that's where I think he's going to run into a lot of trouble with
But
coaches.
that question's up in the air. We can't answer
No,
that.
I understand, but I think, again, it goes back to instincts, and it goes back to the way his mentality is, I think, during the games. He wants to win. He wants to make plays. He wants to, run through people to make plays. But sometimes that's really difficult to change.
Right.
And Michael Vick is a great guy off the field. I know the dog thing we won't even go into that. But I'm saying I just don't think overall Manziel is going to succumb to that easily. Maybe he will down the road when he actually sees himself getting hurt or sees himself on the bench not playing. But to start off, I think it's going to be that's probably going to be the most difficult transition that he is going to have to make.
No, I understand. But if you think he is coachable, because he is a guy that's very rarely failed in his career, I'd imagine. From high school, I think his senior year, he had 75 total touchdowns, passing, receiving, return. Freshman Heisman Trophy winner, comeback in the bowl game this year, which I absolutely loved. He was spectacular in the bowl game against Duke. Showed leadership too, that fiery passion. I think he's a leader on the field. I think people respect him on the field. That's me personally. But he's a guy that's rarely had to fail and had to reevaluate how he's played. In the NFL, he's going to have to do that. So that's what you're trying to project. Whenever he does fail, how does he react to it? And that's true for most of these players. How do they react to failure? It's foreign territory for most of them. And that's part of the draft process that makes it an art, not a science. Because the way that you react to failure and the way that I react to failure are two different things. And that's what makes players so tough to project and why some guys just don't make it even if the talent is there. But if you think you can coach Johnny Manziel and correct those things and teach him properly, you have a solid quarterback coach and a calming presence at head coach, you can take him. Because even with all those mechanical issues and all the reckless play, one of the best players in college football. And that's not an automatic transition to Sundays, no. But he's being talked about as a potential number one quarterback taken, despite, I think, those numerous mechanical flaws. And that speaks volumes to what the pure talent, I hate the term, but I'll use it this one time, the pure talent that he has and the ceiling that he has.
Yeah, again, I do see it. he does have that pure talent because of his ability to make those types of plays. But, again, those types of plays that he makes isn't going to last in the NFL. And he's going to have to go through an entirely different transition of being a quarterback. Sure, he can still be a threat to run, do all that. I mean, but look at RG3, for example. I mean, he made some of those plays when he was with Taylor.
But when you saw that ceiling, RG3 in his rookie year, again, I mean, that was what made Washington go. And again, that's how you have, if you want to take Manziel, that's how you have to look at him, as what is his ceiling. And it's
well, let's say, let me go further with this RG3 comparison here, because let's say he goes in his rookie season, he has a season like the Redskins had in RG3's rookie year. They win the NFC East and they win the division and they go to the playoffs. Mm-hmm. Number one, they lost in that first round game. Number two, RG3 got hurt in that game. Yeah, Number three, they haven't had a good season since then. But even so, even going back to Michael Vick, the furthest he's gone in the playoffs, and this was in his heyday. The furthest he went in the playoffs was the NFC Championship game when he lost to the Eagles and he was with the Falcons.
You have to stop tying him into specific people and say this is the career path.
But I'm just saying overall, when you've seen quote the running quarterback in the NFL,
Steve Young won a Super Bowl. You're talking about running quarterbacks.
I'm talking right. But you're talking about the NFL was totally different when those guys played.
But you're still saying a running quarterback. It was more foreign back then to have a running quarterback, in my opinion. The mobile quarterback.
Right, but defenses weren't as big, fast, and strong as were they good?
Relative.
Yes,
it's all relative though. Because Young might not have been as big or as fast as the players today. I think Johnny Manziel could probably outrun him. It's all relative to me. Is that they all grow at a similar rate. There's some studies out there that's probably not completely true, but it's a similar rate to me. So I don't buy into that a whole lot. I mean, I get the comparisons. You should look at previous guys, and you should to see what history has said. But to tie him in and say, this is the career path that he's going to have because player X had this career path is a little putting the blinders on too much to me. And again, Michael Vick at his ceiling, one of the most electrifying playmakers in the NFL, and that's how you have to look at Manziel. It's tough, and I'm not saying you have to like him. And I think he's a project. I wouldn't take him in the top 5. To me, he's like it's hard for me. He's not a franchise guy right away to me because there is so much risk.
Not a franchise quarterback.
I don't know what that means.
Good football player, not franchise quarterback.
I'm going to stop you there. We're having the first time ever an intelligent discussion, and you just ruined it.
I'm sorry, I had to throw that in there.
Really, really saddening. Was that Jaws?
No, that's Herman Edwards.
Oh,
Your boy Herman Edwards.
My boy Herman Edwards.
But to bring Jaws in the conversation, he is as negative on Johnny Manziel as I am.
I understand.
But he recently he softened a little bit, just saying he wouldn't take him until maybe the second round. At first he said the third round, and I agree with him.
Yeah.
And I still am sticking by it. I wouldn't take him until at least the third round, in my opinion.
I don't know where I'd take him. I wouldn't, because for me, you're in two camps. If you're a team looking for a quarterback, you either need one, you don't have a franchise quarterback, you need one, you take one in the first round, or you have a franchise quarterback, you don't take a quarterback at all. You get a veteran to be a backup because Phil Emery had just said about the study that he did, and I thought about this opinion before, but it's furthered by what Phil Emery said is that those third round guys and on very rarely do they work out. The rate of those guys succeeding is extremely low. And I hate the term looming a quarterback. I think it's a silly term. It doesn't really make much sense. I hate the term she's going to become a solid backup. No other position.
Oh, I absolutely hate that. Why would I want to draft a solid backup?
No other position can say he's going to be a solid backup running back. He'll be
it doesn't make sense.
Tight end. You want to draft a guy to be a starter down the line. You look at what the ceiling is. What can I get out of him at its best? Random tangent. So I don't know exactly where I draft him. Is he a franchise? I can't say he's franchise because there's so much risk with him. I don't know if I can say any of these guys are franchise. I think Bortles is close for me. Bridgewater, I really need to do more homework on him.
Bridgewater is the closest for me.
Okay. But I don't know if any guy is truly franchise. I think that's good enough on the Johnny Manziel debate.
And quarterback in general.
We are more limited than the rest of the guys. The car, Garoppolo. I do like Garoppolo. Got a quick release, small school kid, same school that Sean Payton, Tony Romo went to. Had complete control over that offense. The offense was a little simple, though, for me. His frame is a little slight. He doesn't have a big arm. And, of course, a transition from the FCS level. Mettenberger, he does have a nice arm, good size. but I think some of his deep passes will float a little bit. McCarron, what's the upside there? Garrett Gilbert's a guy that interests me. Don't know much about him, but I know Gil Brandt was a big fan of him, and if Gil Brandt's a big fan of him, he's worth, I think, taking a look at. We'll move on now. I'm getting Football Friday podcast, Alex Kozora, Matt Catrillo. We're about an hour, I think, into this.
Hour and 20.
Get out.
Hour and 20.
Oh, my goodness.
Still going strong.
I have a paper that's due at midnight. I can't.
Well, that's what you get for procrastinating. Mine's already done.
Okay, good gold star for you. I was doing scouting reports.
Yeah, that's true. So you have more important things to do, I guess.
My Shaquille Richardson scouting report. Not a big fan of Shaquille Richardson, by the way. He's a late round guy, but he's got length. But he's not allergic to contact. But he's a poor tackler. Fundamentally, likes to cut, doesn't wrap up. I'm not a big fan of Shaquille Richardson. You find that out though. Actually, by the time you hear this, you've probably already seen the report because it'll likely be up tomorrow. Anyway, what position next? We've taken quarterback, and then you have wide receiver and cornerback.
Well, let's go to receiver real fast. But we won't spend too much time, as we've done a lot this already talking for the Eagles and Steelers needs, Alex. But just to go back to when you were talking about Kelvin Benjamin, I totally agree. Or Kelvin Benjamin, excuse me. Nice prospect, but I'm not seeing the hype with him either. Good size, 6'5", 234. But to me, he is probably the most frustrating receiver that I've seen. I've watched 5 receivers total.
Okay.
Because he's got such great size. He doesn't use it to his advantage, especially when running inside routes. He's better running a go route or a flat pattern or anything like that down the sideline to throw the ball up to. That's fine. Other than that, he's kind of useless for anything else. He can't run the inside. He's not that great of a route runner to begin with. Doesn't have that great hands. He has a lot of drop passes like you mentioned before. But majority of those drop passes come when he's running inside. He's always kind of looking over his shoulder saying, or kind of like the chicken being sleeping with one eye open type of mentality. I don't know.
I'm gonna let you just power through that one. I don't know what you were getting at.
Well, when chickens are in the slaughterhouse, they sleep with one eye open. Just never mind.
Stop winking at me. You don't have to actually do it. It's starting to creep me out. Yeah, he's got the business decision in mind.
Yeah, exactly. He's afraid to get hit, and that causes him to take his eye off the ball, lose his concentration, and just not be the guy he can be and be a reliable target down the middle like most guys his size would be. So to me, that's really my biggest thing. So I'm really just not seeing the hype in general. Could we see him go late first round? Sure. But I really won't be surprised if he were a guy that absolutely drops big time.
Okay, so out of the receivers of your list, do you have an order of them, like a top 5?
I do.
Hit me with that.
I will go Watkins 1, Mike Evans as a very, very close second.
Okay.
Because I really love Mike Evans.
Mm-hmm.
I will go Jordan Matthews 3rd, Marquise Lee 4th. They can be interchangeable, and then Kelvin Benjamin 5th out of the 5.
Give me a little. You said 3 and 4. Matthews and Lee are interchangeable.
Right.
And you already talked about Lee some.
Yeah, I'll get to Matthews
more
now.
Matthews.
Yeah. Because I know you're not as high in Matthews, but I like this guy a lot.
I like him too. I think your comparison, which you'll make here, is completely way off base.
Because I think I've compared him to Deshaun Jackson.
You're completely wrong, I think, on that.
This guy is an electrifying player, and I guess my biggest thing with him is he's so dangerous in space. And very versatile too. He can either line him up in the slot or on the outside. He can make all the tough catches. Obviously, a big play threat overall. Comparing him to Deshaun Jackson. The only thing that can be a little frustrating, and this is very, very nitpicky, but a handful of times he would drop some easy passes, or he would try to extend for like a one-handed catch, and then that ended up leading to a big interception. Other than that, I think he's a stud. I think he's at best he's a mid-first round pick. I think he can go that high. I know he's probably I know most experts have him late first round, early second round, but I think he can go mid-first round.
Mid-first round for Matthews, and in the cousin of Jerry Rice is Jordan Matthews. So from a bloodline perspective, not a bad guy to have at the family reunion. I think you're way up on the Jordan Matthews, Deshaun Jackson, the comparison. I think Matthews might get billed at a possession receiver at 6'3", and I think he's a little bit more than that, but he is not the explosive vertical threat that Deshaun Jackson is. Very few guys in this class as a whole are, let alone Jordan Matthews. Yes, he ran well at the combine, ran a 4.46, like the triangle numbers, and I do like Jordan Matthews, but not for this big vertical threat that you're talking about. He has some surprising yak. He's a guy that, again, is kind of quick to the talk and can get yak. But in terms of that vertical threat that Deshaun Jackson is, that comparison,
I mean, he's
no way. He's bigger. He's a lot bigger. He's a lot more physical and way slower.
But that's I guess to add to my point of why he's like Deshaun Jackson. Deshaun Jackson's very good with yak, yards after the catch.
Yeah,
and I think Matthews is the best receiver probably in this draft that's good yards after the catch.
I think Watkins. I don't know. I think Watkins, Beckham.
I mean, he's definitely right up there. I mean, Watkins obviously is very good. He's up there. But I would say Matthews is probably in the top 3. Mike Evans too is good with yards after the catch, but Matthews is I think is one of the best with that, if not the best.
I like him. I like him for the toughness that he has. I think he's got soft hands, a good catch radius. You're right that he will occasionally let passes into his hands, especially in soft zones across the middle. Occasionally body catch and drop one that he shouldn't. But I think he's a tough guy that's got good size. Triangle numbers are interesting. Again, 6'3", 220 range, I believe, is what he's at. He ran a 4.46 at the combine with good arm length. Did well in my true heights. I look at the Ole Miss game. I remember that one. I was watching it live. It was a really hot day. It was late in the game. Vanderbilt was down against Ole Miss. Matthews takes a big shot across the middle, holds on to the catch, but he's tired. He's dehydrated. He takes a big shot. He gets sick on the field. He comes off for a couple plays. He comes back on a 4th and 18 and catches a big go route down the field to keep the drive alive that Vanderbilt would eventually score on. They do lose that game in part to a drop from Jordan Matthews that led to an interception. But I don't see that kind of vertical threat. Definitely not Deshaun Jackson. I mean, he's got decent speed, better than what he's probably been credited for, because people might say he's just a possession receiver because they see the big body, but he's not Deshaun Jackson. The biggest issues with him, though, with Matthews, would be the occasional drop, and then I think he's not a natural separator because of that size. He just have trouble sinking his hips. I think he gets separation more on his physicality and ability to box out and kind of push defenders, more so than actual innate separation. So I will disagree. I like him, but I disagree with your comparison. I'm not sure who I would compare him to. I'm not a big comparison guy, but he's not Deshaun Jackson.
I guess we'll have to agree to disagree on that one.
Fair enough. But I'll run through my list of the 9 that I have here. And this is not everybody again. I wish I could get to everybody. And once I finally graduate, I actually have time to do that. That'd be nice.
We have this thing called class and schoolwork, which is totally irrelevant, but
unfortunately. But I'll go through my list. I'll read them all, and then I'll go through each one briefly. Watkins, Mike Evans, Devontae Adams, Fresno State kid, as my number 3. Odell Beckham.
You love Devontae Adams.
I do. I'll get them in a second. Odell Beckham Jr., number 4. That's really close. Jordan Matthews, 5. Martavis Bryant, 6. Dante Moncrief, 7. Quincy Enunwa, 8. And Cody Hoffman, 9. Of course, not every single receiver in this class is so deep, but those are the guys that I've seen. I didn't do actual full reports on Watkins or Evans, but I've seen enough of them watching Manziel, watching Bryant, just watching Clemson games in general. They were usually on TV to get a decent feel for them. Adams, I really do like. I think he's really an underrated wide receiver in a really deep class. And if this class was not so deep, he'd be in the mix as a solid first-round pick. He's not 6'5". He's just under 6'1". What I love about him the most, though, is that quickness and that burst off the line and after the catch. Again, we talk about guys that are quick to the top. I think Devontae Adams has that. Productivity at Fresno State. He had 24 touchdowns this past year. No other player in Division I had more than 18. So you talk about production, which is, again, it's not the sale end all, but he has a ton of that. I like his catch radius too. He's got a great vertical, 39.5-inch vertical at the combine. Shows that on tape. Good hands. I think he's a really good separator. I talk about guys that are natural separators. Jordan Matthews isn't. Devontae Adams is. And he's not huge, but he's got good size. Just being under 6'1", is more than acceptable in my mind. So I really like Devontae Adams. Odell Beckham, we talked about him. Explosion, return value is absolutely huge as a day one kid. Jordan Matthews, we talked about. Martavis Bryant, polarizing prospect. I compare him a lot to Stephen Hill of the Jets, a guy that's really raw, just 62 career catches. Devontae Adams had more than 62 catches after the first 8 weeks of this season. To put that in perspective, what Adams did in 8 weeks is more than what Bryant's done in his entire career. Guy that wasn't thrown to a lot, but the triangle numbers at his size, he's just under 6'4", Ran well at the combine, times well. The trial numbers they all check out. A guy that can be a vertical threat, that does track the ball well, and is still trying to hone his craft as a guy that has not played a lot, but a raw route runner. Ran a lot of go routes at Clemson. Of course, Hill, that was a triple option offense. Clemson is not, but the route running was pretty similar, a very limited route tree, and a guy that just has not played a lot of football.
We won't get into that debate about the triple option offense or one.
I know you do not like the triple option offense. I don't understand the philosophy of not liking the triple option offense. Neither here nor there. Dante Moncrief, I think, is overrated. Yeah, the measurables are there. Yeah, he ran really well at the combine. People compare him to Mike Wallace. He can be a vertical threat, but a guy that's a really, really bad habitual body catcher. Lets way too many in his chest. Does not play with a catch radius that he should. And just can be lazy at times, to be honest. And he's got poor effort as a run blocker. Will take some plays off. Some of these scramble drills they had at Ole Miss, he just quit on some plays, didn't try to extend, run with the quarterback, and come back to the football. So I don't like Dante Moncrief. I think he's actually an overrated prospect. In a wide receiver class, I do like a lot on the whole. Quincy Enunwa, later round guy. I'm a big fan of him. I actually think he's Hines Ward. Maybe a little bit more athletic than Hines Ward, but a guy that takes a ton of pride in run blocking. It's one of my favorite things about him is his run blocking. Nebraska, they ran the ball over 1,200 times the last 2 years, so you're gonna have to be good at run blocking to be able to do that. Statistically, the numbers aren't huge, but the quarterback situation in Nebraska is never the greatest. But a guy that has pretty good size, 6'2", and actually has really good size, 6'2", 225, ran a 4.45 at Nebraska's pro day. Doesn't really show up on tape, but he's a decent athlete and has some fluidity in his hips and can get out of his breaks. So I do like Quincy Enunwa, a co-captain, a senior year. I think good value. I would take him in the 6th round. And then Cody Hoffman, just did a report on him from BYU, a guy that's just under 6'4", really soft hands, good body control, can adjust to the football, can make difficult catches, makes a quarterback look good, but a limited athlete, really poor vertical, 27.5 inches at the combine. That was the worst. Only 31 inches at his pro day. And then natural separator, he is not very slow at the top of his stem, rolling out of his cuts. He tends to round off his breaks and really plant and cut sharply. Separation issues is going to be his biggest concern. I don't think he can overcome that. So his ceiling is limited. At best, he's a Z receiver, not a number 1, but a number 2 Z receiver that can try to block and be reliable on third down, but nothing more. He'll never be a number 1 wide receiver. So that's what we have for wide receiver. We'll go to cornerback before we take a quick break. But we'll go cornerback now. Another class that's right up there with wide receiver that's very, very deep at the top and throughout. And Matt, I'll start with you. Take it away.
Well, actually, Alex, I hate to disappoint you, but I've only watched one cornerback.
Just one.
And I'm not a big fan of him. And that is Darqueze Dennard from Michigan State.
And Dennard has been mocked to the Steelers a lot, so I guess you picked a good one to watch.
Yeah, I guess for the Steelers' sake. So I hope I don't disappoint any fans Steelers fans that might be a Darqueze Dennard fan. And he was my overrated player in our overrated underrated section on the CUTV draft show. I mean, he's a good player, but to me, out of all the guys that I've watched in this draft, he is the most frustrating player that I have watched because I think he can be so much better than what he is. Has a few bad habits that really hurt him in coverage. Constantly turns his head away from the ball. He grabs way too much. Constantly beat to the inside, which all led to penalties or big plays. And especially with the way the NFL calls pass interference now, if I just poke you, Alex, I would get flagged for pass interference the way they've been calling that now in the NFL. Yeah. So I think that's really going to be problematic for anybody that has him on his team. Does have very good speed and good feet, very versatile, can play on the outside or play in the nickel. Probably will be seen as a nickel guy considering his size, but he's 5'10", 7'8" inches, 199 pounds. Also can play special teams, which obviously helps with anybody having that versatility playing on special teams. I haven't projected in the late 2nd round, but I could see him drop to the early 3rd round. I know that's not going to happen, but that's where I would take it.
Glad you clarified that.
Yes,
that certainly will not happen.
Yes, and look, to clarify too, going back to Manziel just real quickly, I obviously am not naive. I know that he will probably be a 1st round pick, could be top 5, top 10, top 15, wherever. But that's where I would have chosen Manziel at the time. But same here with Darqueze Dennard, not a big fan.
I can appreciate somebody going against the grain and not falling into that group thing, but there are limits, and I think an early 3rd round grade on Darqueze Dennard is pushing them. So your main point against Denard is what? You give it to me in a sentence or two. What is your main knock against him?
I guess my main is I think he just grabs too much, and the way he's just beat to the inside is just really concerning, especially if you're going to put him up against a tight end.
Well, you likely wouldn't.
I mean, you wouldn't, but let's say if you, because in the way his size is, he's most likely going to be put in as a nickel guy. I mean, I could be totally wrong about that.
I don't see him as a nickel.
Well, anyway, let's say they have to put him there for whatever reason. He'll easily get beat by whatever tight end they play, especially if he's going up against like a Jimmy Graham or anything like that.
That's 199 pounds is going to be a mismatch against a 250 Jimmy Graham. Of course.
Well, right, but I'm saying I think he can be beat by any tight end because of the way he's just always beaten to the inside.
See, I really have to sit down
and the grabbing too, because he's gonna draw so many penalties, and that's gonna kill his team.
To your first point, I'd have to sit down with you, and I don't want to do this and actually watch a game with you and talk about.
Well, we've done it before. We haven't done it in a while.
Yeah, but I'm saying to sit down and you talk about Denard getting beat to the inside. If I had to guess, you're just getting that from it's all schematics because let's say you're playing cover one. And you're playing outside leverage, you're going to let the receiver win inside and then funnel him to the safety. So I don't know for sure when that's come up for you. And
also one other big pet peeve: always turns his head away from the football. That's my other big pet peeve.
Because he plays a bunch of man coverage. That's what he is.
You still got to find a way to put yourself in position. That's what all the good guys do.
I don't like corners that look back at the football, to be honest, because you know who you lose. The receiver.
Exactly.
No, that's my point. If you turn your head and look to the football, you're losing the receiver. And you're going to focus on the receiver. The receiver will tell you when the ball's going to be there. You don't got to look at the ball itself. You're in man coverage, turn and run.
And also, too, if you're going to be a grabby kind of guy and you have your head to get back to the ball, again, you're going to get caught.
I understand.
Do I necessarily agree with that? No.
That's a flaw.
That's the way they're going to be.
But the receiver will take you to the football. Play the pocket of the receiver, which is something Denard does really, really well. Whenever that receiver, he's either looking, you can see in his eyes, you can see in his hands, as he goes to extend his hands, you know when the ball's coming. The receiver will tell you. You don't have to go back and watch the ball. You know when the ball's going to be there. Play the pocket of the receiver, play through the hands, and knock through. He's done that. I get the idea that he is too physical, and that's going to cost him the NFL, and you're going to have to try to tone him down a little bit. But to steal a line from Mike Tomlin, he always says, I'd rather say whoa than sick him. Meaning, I'd rather for play to be a little too aggressive than not aggressive enough. You can tone a guy down. It's tough to kind of bring a guy up, and either you have it or you don't. I said this stupid, corny line of that he treats receivers the way that line is treated his blanket, always holding on. It's a really corny line, I know. But
I can appreciate that. I love the peanuts. I like that.
Yeah.
Very good reference.
So yeah, but what does he do best? He's a man corner that's physical, that plays the ball well in the air, has ball skills, can play the pocket of receiver, and didn't allow many passes his way in Michigan State. I think it was part of that no-fly zone. I don't know what they call it at Michigan State.
Shoot fly, don't bother me. Shoot fly, don't bother me.
You're starting to just become delusional. In like the hour and 45 minutes that we're into it, took you that long for a song reference, which is actually probably your personal best. You've gone that long.
It probably is. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Far from the truth. Getting back to what I was saying, I think in a man scheme, he's going to do well. And if you can tone down a little bit, I think he'll be a great corner. Is he the fastest cornerback? No. By the game speed is much better than the time speed. I mean, he played that much man coverage, a lot of press coverage, bump and run. If you're speed deficient, that was going to get exposed. He didn't time well. He ran the 4.5s at the combine. He plays faster on tape. He's got this. I don't love the speed, and I see the time. I see it on tape, and I go, he's not that fast, but it works for him. He very rarely got beat. It's part of technique. Part of that could be because he holds on a little bit and is gaining that edge, but he finds a way to not get beat, which is all that really matters. And I think he has enough speed for the position. The biggest issue, is that he can't be too grabby, and that he's not that he's undersized. I mean, his size isn't terrible, but he's got a lean build, not a whole lot of bulk to him, not a lot of muscle. With Denard, now to bring him back to the Steelers, because the Steeler fans and a lot of draftniks are mocking Denard to go to the Steelers at 15. I like him, but I don't think he's a good fit for the Steelers because it's you have to look at a player, and I wrote about this in my article on Denard if you read it. You have to look at a player, any player, in two ways. One, does he have the talent to transition to play on Sunday? If he doesn't, don't bother with him. If he does, you go to the second question. Does he fit schematically with us? The answer to the first question is a resounding yes. He has the talent to play on Sundays. He will be a successful corner. But the answer to the second question is in the right scheme. And because he's a press corner who likes to bump and run and get physical and is uncomfortable playing that deep third, I don't think he's a good fit for the Steelers. I think he's a lot more uncomfortable playing off coverage and zone coverage than he is getting his hands onto you and turning and running with you. So I think schematically he's a bad fit because if you draft him, you're asking him to do something he didn't do a lot at Michigan State, and that becomes a really murky projection with a lot of gray area when you're asking him to do something different than he did in college. It's like a free agent that you get from some other NFL team. You put him in a different scheme, you're asking him to do something you have not seen. There's an extra layer of projection there, and that makes the evaluation process murky. So I don't like Denard for the Steelers, but I do like him as a cornerback.
All right, I guess we'll have to agree to disagree on that one. But I would agree that he's not a good scheme, good schematically fit for the Steelers
and I think he actually has just average lower body strength and explosion to click and close, which is something you have to have in a corner or in a zone scheme, to be able to click and close on the football and rally to the ball.
Absolutely.
I think he's a man corner, not a zone corner. I don't think he fits for the Steelers.
Now, one of the guy, Alex, before I'll let you go ramble on the rest of the cornerbacks if you watched, because this guy is to me really intriguing because I don't know where he's going to go. Now, I thought he would be a safety. I think he still can play safety, but I know his size is going to kill him, and he's probably going to end up playing nickel or out on the outside in general. And that's LaMarcus Joyner from Florida State. He's 5'8", 184, and because I watched him as a safety, and he's listed as a safety on Draft Breakdown. I put him as the best safety that I had watched to date.
What other safeties have you watched?
I've watched LaMarcus Joyner. I have watched HaHa Clinton-Dix. And I have watched Calvin Pryor.
Okay.
Those are the three safeties that I have watched. Just to go back to Joyner, great speed and athleticism. He hits hard, tackles well. Pretty good in getting to and playing the run also. Bottom line, this guy makes plays. Reads the quarterback size very well. He can force fumbles. He's a threat blitzing from the outside. He's probably the definition of versatile in pass coverage because he can play over the top, to the outside, or in the nickel. Where his size is, the way he is for his size will probably determine where he actually plays. But I still think he's good enough to play cornerback because of his closing speed to a runner in the running game or even in any sort of the passing game. Because he can make plays and force fumbles, make picks, all that stuff. Plays also both sides of special teams. I think he's a first-round pick, mid to late first round. That's where I would take him.
I haven't really watched him up close and personal. I've seen some people talk about it, and they really share your sentiment of a guy that, yes, he's small, but don't get too involved with his size. Don't obsess over it too much. The guy can play. And that's really the important thing. People focus on size way too much, and they will watch tape and say this guy's really good, but then they'll focus on just the height and the weight, and they'll completely disregard what they saw on tape. You gotta trust your eyes sometimes. You'll say there are exceptions to the rule, and not just get so blinded by size. It's one of my biggest pet peeves in the draft process, and it really really bugs me. He might be a nickel corner, so let's just say that he's gonna be a nickel corner. That's okay in today's NFL. This isn't 1975.
Oh, totally, yeah. Again, especially with the emergence of the tight end in the passing game, you need a good, solid nickel quarterback now in this league.
But
not only that, too, but the emergence of some good slot receivers, too.
That's the bigger thing, is because teams are running so much 11 personnel and going 3 wide receivers. I talked about it before. It's, again, not 1975 where you're running your base 3-4 4-3 defense and have 2 cornerbacks. You have to be nickel deep, dime deep, really, really dime deep at this point in today's age to protect yourself against injury. So even if he's a nickel corner, you might as well call him a starting cornerback because with how much sub-package these teams play, again, the Steelers, 60% of the snaps last year were in sub-package football. That's nickel or dime. You're seeing the field basically as much as these starters. So I don't care that he's short and undersized. Nickel corner, it used to be a negative connotation. It should be a positive one now because you're a starter, because you're going to be valuable, because you have to. Your assignment can be tougher than a boundary corner sometimes because you have to be able to have that change of direction and that hip fluidity He's able to turn inside and outside because you don't know what the route tree is going to be. The route tree is a lot more open when you're covering the slot than you are on the boundary. So does the size bother me for Joyner? It really doesn't. It really does not. So,
yeah, like I said, I think he can play either way. But I think he can still make it as a safety. But I think because of his size, I would agree that he's probably going to be put in the nickel.
I want to go through, if you don't mind, the rest of the cornerbacks that I've watched so far. I didn't watch a really great deal of Kyler Fuller. Dave Bryan at Steelers Depot did a report on him, so go ahead and check that one out. To get a really good read on Kyle Fuller. I'll go through the rest that I've watched again in no particular order, just in the order, like I said, I've written them so far. I'll start with Victor Hampton from South Carolina, a guy with great ball skills, is aggressive, plays the pocket well, tracks the ball in the air well. But I can't get on board with him. I think he's similar to Denard, that he's a man corner that can turn and run. Probably nickel as well because he is undersized. But he's an awful tackler, really poor form, has no strength. He's like your kid brother. He wants to be competitive, wants to get involved, but he gets pushed around way too much. And that's what I call him.
I love it.
Because he's a fiery guy. He's fiery, he's competitive, he wants to get involved, but he does not have the strength because he's undersized, so he gets pushed around real bad by stock blocks, by these wide receivers pushing him around. And he's a really poor tackler. I mean, I think in the Arkansas game alone, he missed 4 tackles. He only made 2. I think he missed like 8 tackles in the couple games that I watched of Victor Hampton. So as a Steelers cornerback, if you can't tackle and you can't support the run, you're not gonna succeed. But I do like Victor Hampton, but a man scheme as a nickel corner, I think is where he fits best. Also some character issues. I think he's cleaned up his ex. Steve Spurrier spoke highly of him, but he had some stuff early in his career that had to be answered. Talk about Denard. So we wanted my next guy. It's actually my number 2 corner. So Denard's not my number 2 corner. It's Jason Verrett from TCU. And he gets knocked because he's undersized too. I think he's like 5'9", $190, somewhere around there. But there isn't a guy with quicker feet and a quicker close on the football in this draft class than Jason Verrett. Ultra aggressive, trusts himself immensely, probably too much, but a playmaker on the football, can play the pocket of the receiver, reads routes well, has really quick feet, smooth hips, and that click and close to the football. Is really impressive. Has a lot of lower body strength for his svelte frame. So I really like Jason Verrett. I think he's an excellent zone corner. If the Steelers wound up with him, I mean, I wouldn't complain too much about it. I'm a big fan of Jason Verrett. Philip Gaines from Rice. I just didn't see anything that special with him. He's got some size. He ran well at the combine. He ran a 4.38. But I just didn't see any defining trait to his game, so I'm not a big fan of Philip Gaines. The Gaines I do like is E.J. Gaines from Missouri, and he's a Steelers cornerback. He didn't run that well. He's not a special athlete, though he did shut down Mike Evans, who only held him to 4 catches for 8 yards. His worst game of the year was Missouri's E.J. Gaines. But he's really a zone corner. What I love about him is his physicality. He'll support the run. He's a good tackler, reliable, will get his nose dirty, and that's what Steelers cornerbacks need. He's kind of like William Gay a little bit, though he's a little bit...
Oh, maybe some Steeler fans won't like that because apparently William Gay's the worst quarterback in the league.
They don't like Steve McClendon, which I don't understand. They don't like William Gay, which I'll never understand either, but such is life. So I really like E.J. Gaines, a mid-round guy, 3rd, 4th round, good pedigree, had a lot of accolades at Missouri, 5 interceptions this senior year, though really they came off tip passes. They really weren't created by him. So he's not, that ball hawk of 5 interceptions might seem to indicate, but he doesn't have to be in the Steelers scheme. So I really like E.J. Gaines. Mike Tomlin loves a double-dipper cornerback. He's done that twice now in his time here in the mid-rounds. Take 1 in the 3rd, take 1 in the 5th, something like that. I think that's a possibility, so hopefully they would take E.J. Gaines. Ross Cockrell from Duke. I think the Steelers will draft him, but that will disappoint me because I don't like Ross Cockrell. A guy that's a good athlete, has some ball skills, good, smooth, fluid hips and runs well, but a guy that's really shy against contact, likes to bow out, doesn't want to get his nose dirty, is a poor tackler. I don't think he really fits the Steelers well, but the team has shown a ton of interest in him. They were at Duke's Pro Day, and he's a high character guy, which is something that the teams will definitely hold in high regard. But I don't like him. But I think the team actually will walk away with him if I had to guess. Keith McGill from Utah, one of the taller cornerbacks in this class, 6'3", 7'8". Came to Utah as a free safety and moving to cornerback. I think his best fit is actually going back to free safety. I don't think he has enough speed to play the position. He likes to be aggressive, over-aggressive, peek in the backfield. Verrett actually has the same problem, but McGill doesn't have the speed, I think, to make up for it. I think he's best at free safety with his immense length. He can make plays in the football that other defensive backs can't because he just don't have that kind of length that he has, the size and the arm length. I think he's best at free safety because he's a little shy against contact, but put him in center field, let him read the cornerback, and make some plays on the football. And then Justin Gilbert, who I mentioned before, is my top cornerback in this draft class. I think he checks all the boxes to steal a line from Mike Mayock. He's big at 202, fills out his frame really well, looks the part as an NFL cornerback. Click and close is fantastic, lower leg strength, 7 interceptions, return value, starting experience. I really didn't see many flaws in his game. His biggest flaw for Justin Gilbert, he's too tall. And that's a common thing for these tall cornerbacks. Gilbert's 6 foot and 7/8. He'll play too tall on his pedal at times. Sometimes he can sink his hips, but he's got to be more consistent with it. And when he is too tall, his hips will get stiff and he has trouble transitioning to that next phase and flipping his hips. So that's an issue that just gets repped and with muscle memory and time, probably some yoga for Justin Gilbert, but he's my top cornerback. And again, a guy that can become your starting kick returner from day one, even if he isn't your starting cornerback.
And I laughed when you said you can probably use some yoga, but it's actually true. That's how some of these guys can make the catches that they do, as they take yoga.
Jonathan Stewart to improve
and even some ballet classes, too.
Yeah, Lynn Swan. Lynn Swan, for example. Jonathan Stewart taking yoga classes in the offseason to try to improve his flexibility and his durability. So, hey, don't knock it. Whatever you got to do to get that edge.
Exactly.
Any other thoughts here on the quarterback class? Just real quick to give me my top. I don't have really a whole list made, but my top 3: Gilbert 1, Verrett 2, Denard at number 3, and that's with the thought in mind. I haven't taken a good look at Kyle Fuller, so I don't know really where he would fit. Any other final thoughts?
Quarterback was kind of my weaker class as far as having tape watch is concerned. So,
but from an actual cornerback standpoint, it's a really, really deep class. So we'll take a break here on the football podcast. Alex Kozora, Matt Catrillo will be back in a second. And welcome back to the Football Friday podcast. Alex Kozora, Matt Catrillo. If you've been listening for the hour and 50 now, God bless you. For any listening faithful. If you're just skipping around, then hey, welcome back. We'll move on now through our draft coverage. Again, draft this Thursday. Interesting side note, because the draft got moved back the extra 2 weeks because there was already a scheduled event at Radio City Music Hall. So there's a possibility it'll stay where it's at for this upcoming year. There's debate about it. But the event that was already scheduled, which I don't know what event is able to push the NFL draft out of the way. I have no idea what event that was. That event got postponed, so there's actually nothing going on during that.
That was a bad timing.
Yeah. So
I'm curious what the event was.
I'm not even sure. I totally forget what the. I don't remember the story.
That's still a bucket list of mine is to actually go to New York City. I'm not that far. I'm about an hour and a half drive from New York. I'd love to go.
Yeah, it'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I think it's free tickets, so it's first come first served. So you get in line super early, but well worth it. I think to definitely bucket list material. Yeah. Moving on now to some sleepers. And I don't know if you have anyone in mind. I mean, it can be underrated players. It can be late round guys. I mean, I'll let you take it however you wish. There, Matt.
Well, I guess I'll take some time to talk about Michael Sam a little bit because I know his draft stock has been taking a huge hit today, which I'm surprised and not surprised about, Alex, because obviously he's the first gay player to come out and he'll should be the first gay player in the NFL, assuming that he's drafted. Mm-hmm. In terms of on-the-field stuff, I mean, I think there's a lot more talent than what people think. So I'm going to put him as underrated because a lot of people are trashing, basically kicking him to the curb at this point for everything that we've heard today all of a sudden on SportsCenter. To me, he's got pretty good speed off the ball, has a pretty good swim move, still needs to work on a spin move. The only time I saw it was against Oklahoma State in the bowl game. He can be disruptive at times on the quarterback, but also can be inconsistent getting off blocks, obviously, that's a pretty big thing. Does a great job in crashing the inside, especially against the run. I think that's probably the strongest part of his game. On the field, I think he's a mid to late second round pick, maybe even a third. But again, at the time when I wrote it, him coming out as a gay player came out, so I wasn't sure if that would take a hit or not. It shouldn't. I hope it doesn't. And I hope on the field stuff is the main reason why his stock is dropping. So I'll just leave it at that. But I just think there's more to him. Especially, I think he's better against the run than he is as a pass rusher. But as a pass rusher, this guy can make plays. I mean, he made the game-winning play for Missouri in the Cotton Bowl against Oklahoma State. And I'm personally, I thought that was the best game of his career, because he put on a clinic that day. I mean, the whole Missouri defense did. Those are just my quick thoughts on Michael Sam. I guess is my underrated player, since I know his stock took a hit today.
Yeah, SEC co-defensive player of the year.
Right, that too.
I believe 11.5 sacks is what he had his senior year. Now let me be, and not to get into this too much, because it's been talked about a lot, but let me just be blunt with you, Matt. How much do you think is the fact that he's going to be the first openly gay player in the NFL affecting his draft stock, or do you see it just as a tape thing?
I mean,
it's tough. I really that for sure.
Yeah, I know. We obviously this is purely speculation of our conversation here, but there's no doubt in my mind. There's got to be. It may not be the whole reason, but there's definitely at least a minor part of why people are staying away from him. And to me, that's selfish. But B, that's just not right. I mean, not to get on another off the field tangent here, but I'm sorry, if you can't deal or with anybody, or you're going to be uncomfortable with a gay player, I mean, you simply got to get over it. That's all I really got to say, because you're paid millions and millions of dollars to play football and obviously deal with your teammates. And anybody in any given workforce has to learn to deal with players that they're on, to deal with coworkers that they're maybe uncomfortable with or just don't like in general. But to be uncomfortable because of that factor, just because he's going to be on a football team with a bunch of guys that have most likely, most of them have chiseled bodies and could be good looking or all that stuff, but that doesn't mean he's going to come out and try and hook up with one of them. Since we're being blunt here.
Yeah, I understand.
So I mean, if that is the minor part, I'm sure it is. There's no denying it. To me, I just don't understand it at all. Because you're professionals, just be one. I mean, if you have them around your team,
it might play a role, and obviously it's a big topic of discussion for the media. But I don't think I don't think it really has a big influence right now, because what we're hearing of why teams, or why he's being rated so lowly, it's coming from scouts. So they're not the ones that have to, I guess, quote unquote, worry about it, for lack of a better word. That the off the field stuff, they were just projecting him as a player, and it's not like it's a character thing or stuff like that. They're just saying what player he could be, and they're rating him low as a 7th rounder or free agent, because of a perceived lack of talent as a player. So it's not even the on-field stuff. It's not like it's a coach saying that, because he has to deal with handling the locker room. The scout doesn't have to worry about that. It's just talent. Can you play?
Well, right.
Most say he can't.
Well, I understand that, and I'm sure that's about 80-90% of what scouts look at. But scouts also look at a little bit, and this is where the minor part comes in, of their character, what kind of atmosphere would they bring to the locker room? What kind of disruptions would they bring to the locker room? And it certainly played a factor.
It's not a character concern, though. There's character concerns
because he's got extremely good character,
right? I mean, he was, there's a Victor Hampton character who's was suspended and things like that. And then what Michael Sam, that's a separate thing. So yeah, I mean, the scouts talk about it. Is that a little factor? Yeah, but mostly their job is to evaluate the tape, and then character things like off the field issues and legal issues. So, I don't know. I mean, he's a guy, people question his, hip and ankle flexibility. He didn't do all at the combine, didn't do a whole lot better at his pro day. I think most of it's rooted in talent or lack thereof. Not the offense.
I don't, especially pro days. I don't like to. I don't think pro days personally should have a big factor.
No.
Because you're on your home turf, you're comfortable with what you're doing. Combine, okay, because you're dealing with NFL coaches and all that stuff, and you're not used to the atmosphere you're working in and stuff like that, and you have a lot thrown at you, so that tests a lot of players. That's fine. Pro day to me, because you look at Teddy Bridgewater, he had an awful pro day, but he still probably will be a first round pick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying is that he didn't time well, and I think you look at the tape, does that flexibility exist? And he's a better college player than he will be in the NFL. That's the way I see it.
I understand everybody's concern, especially in the passing game, but I think he's a very good run stuffer. I think, could he be a 1-2 tech guy? I think he'd be probably better fit there.
No, because he's how much does he weigh?
He's 261.
not a one tech.
Well, he's certainly athletic enough, I think, to
But
make it.
the size, I mean, no, from a size and strength standpoint, to be a one deck. Now, someone who might be is his teammate Coney Ely, who's about 275. That some team said they actually might like him better at defensive tackle. It's probably a 3 tech, not a 1 tech. That's the other part for Sam, is that he's not, fluid enough to be a linebacker. Does he have, pass rushing skills alone to be a defensive end? There's a projection issue with Michael Sam, too. He's that tweener, doesn't really fit at end, doesn't really fit outside linebacker, might be too heavy to play outside linebacker, not really quick enough at end. That's another issue with Michael Sam. So, I don't know. I mean, I can see what Scott is saying. It has nothing to do with anything else. It's just pure tape and ability. But anybody else that you think is underrated you've come across, you've heard about, anyone else that you like?
One other guy that I like, this is going back to linebackers. I don't think it's necessarily going to be a sleeper per se. I just haven't talked about him yet. Telvin Smith, outside linebacker from Florida State. I think this would be my second highest rated linebacker, I would say, of all the linebackers that I've watched. Mm-hmm. Really solid in the running game, great instincts, great closing speed on in the running game on running backs. Also in coverage, and also bringing up passes in coverage. Can read the quarterback size very, very well. Seems very well prepared for every game. You can just tell when reading the quarterback size, and he just seems to have great anticipation and going back to the great instincts. Yeah, does a pretty good job on special teams as well, which of course, as we said before, helps anybody with having that versatility. I would like to see more weight on him.
That's my concern. He's 218.
Yeah, 6'3", 218. But other than that, I think he's a mid to late first round pick.
218 though, you can't play NFL linebacker at 218.
Right? No, there's no question he's got to put more weight. But I really do. I like what he can do, though.
We've talked about this before. You're now projecting him. What kind of speed and athleticism will he have when you put 15, 20 pounds on him? How much is he going to lose? You really can't answer that for sure. That's the concern. And it's Aaron Maben disease, a guy that was 225 at his senior year at Penn State and was a great edge rusher. But then he had to put on weight and he lost a lot of speed and he playing down in the NFL. So that's my concern with Smith.
Right, it's definitely my concern too. But I mean, I look at this guy as a playmaker and everything that he can do.
But you're at 218.
No. Again, I totally understand. But as an outside linebacker, especially in today's NFL, especially when we talk about the emergence of a 2 tight end system that we're seeing from multiple teams, you got to be able to be very good in pass coverage. And I think you see that from Telvin Smith.
But I know I'm repeating myself. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but that's at his current playing weight. That's not what he's going to be playing at the next level.
Right, no, I understand, but again,
so there's a projection there.
Right, I look at the playmaking ability as a big thing. But again, size definitely needs
and there's something to be
work.
said for you're going to see more hybrid players that can play in sub-package football, and that's going to bode well for Smith. Because you're going to need guys that can turn and run and can play all 3 downs and have that supreme athleticism that might not be as heavy as conventional wisdom would dictate and wouldn't fit that cookie cutter mold. But I don't know. It's just 218. It's just he was like 230. Okay.
Yeah, it is concerning, but I think he can pull it off.
For my sleepers, I'm just kind of been just going down the list here. I talked about a new one before from Nebraska. I love him as a blocker. I think he's a good enough receiver to be a number 2 receiver. I'm a big fan of him. Some of these I've mentioned before. Roy Finch from Oklahoma. He's going to probably be an undrafted free agent. I think he's a Dre Archer light type. Had some work ethic concerns at Oklahoma. Got put in the doghouse. Didn't really play a whole lot. Saw him at the NFLPA game or bowl game, and I think he's a really one cut and go guy. Maintains speed through his cuts. Great acceleration, return value. I think he's going to have a better NFL career than college career. Jamie Metter from Ashland, just a guy that's just an old-school throwback guy, just from like a 1970s, just no neck at all. It's just all muscle. He played 5-tech at Ashland, and they ran a 3-4. He could probably be 5-tech and be a 1-tech at the next level. Just ridiculously strong and plays with really good leverage. EJ Gaines, who I mentioned, you want corners that are physical, that won't shy away from contact. That's your guy. Justin Ellis, the nose tackle from Louisiana Tech, I think he's Lewis Nix light. Very similar player, but you can get 2, possibly 3 rounds later. A really good athlete for his size, about 335. Weight is an issue. He's dropped it because he started to balloon up into the 350 range his senior year at Louisiana Tech. But a really good motor, moves really well for a guy that size, and has enough strength to hold the point of attack. Other ones, I like Cyrus Quandra from Alabama. People have been knocking him since the combine. He didn't look good at the combine. There's rumors about his knee. Is it arthritic? Teams, medical concerns with that. I compare him to Cordy Glenn, though. I think he's got athleticism to play left tackle, long arms, looks the part, a good enough run blocker. Doesn't have that necessarily nasty, but I think he's a good enough run blocker. I think he actually moves well laterally, can mirror, and is a better pass protector than you'd expect. Will Clark from West Virginia, a local kid, went to Taylor Allardyce High School. A guy that's big and long frame that can probably add some more weight. Another good athlete. Could probably play a 4-3 defensive end, or maybe even 3-4, play the 5 tech. Has the strength to hold up against the point of attack. I think there's a lot of upside there. Trey Mason, the running back from Auburn. Haven't talked about the running back class a whole lot, really at all, in this podcast. He's probably one of my top running backs. People say he's Ray Rice. I don't really see Ray Rice. He doesn't have the really build of that. I don't think he's as thick in the midsection as Ray Rice, but he's a tough runner than you'd expect from his size. Keeps his leg moving, can run inside. Shows enough explosive plays to keep you watching. Return value he has. I'm just concerned Auburn's offense was conducive to big plays, letting the running back have a lot of space, so there's some concern there. But I like Trey Mason. He doesn't dance. He's a one-cut and get downhill kind of running back with some pop. So I like Trey Mason. And then my final one, I saved him for last because he's my man crush. It's Chris Borland, the inside linebacker from Wisconsin. I think he's next Luke Kuechly, and that's not hyperbole at all. I promise you. He's a guy who does not fit the cookie cutter mold. He's not the greatest athlete, but he's a better athlete than people give him credit for. He can do a backflip, takes good angles with the football. No one works harder than him. Quickest hands at linebacker in this class. Can get off blocks. Got workout warrior in the weight room. Everyone respects him. No one says a bad thing about him. He's a leader, high character. Does a lot of community work, going to schools, talking to kids. Just a guy that's just going to work hard. Great effort on every single play. You know what you're going to get with him. All the cliches I'm using right now. He's a stud, a day one starter for the next 15 years. Maybe not 15 years, 10 years. Regardless, I would love for the Steelers to take him in the second round. Inside linebacker, it's a need, but it's not the biggest need. But whoever takes Chris Borland is going to be a happy camper. I mean, he's the next Luke Kuechly. That's what I got. That's what I'm telling you.
Are you going to plead to Mike Tomlin again to pick him? Like
if I had his number, Matt, I'd call him up right now. That's the only thing I can say to him. I would say draft Chris Borland.
You try and break into the Steelers war room there and do that?
There's no player I've been more excited to watch than Chris Borland. He's not the best prospect, but I haven't been as excited to watch a player in this class for this year than I was Chris Borland. And I didn't expect much of him. Whenever I watched him, I thought, he's an undersized guy at like 5'11 and a half. I figured he's not going to fit that cookie cutter mold. He's going to get pushed around and things like that. I was playing the role of a bad scout. He was assuming things, and I ate crow for that one because I think Chris Borland is a fantastic player and a day one starter. So let's wrap things up here. We'll go through. We got two more sections, I guess. We'll go through each position, position, and kind of just to give a quick evaluation of what we think about it. We'll start with the quarterback again, and then we'll go to our top 5 projection to kind of round things out. So, Matt, just give me a summary of what you think the quarterback position, the makeup of that is like.
Okay. Well, I think the strongest position talk would be the receiver class. I think
Well, let's start quarterback. Let's go position.
Oh, quarterback.
Class by class, if you could.
Oh, stronger for cornerback. Well, I've only watched Darqueze Dennard, and I don't think
quarterback.
Oh, quarterback.
Quarterback.
Sorry.
Wow, this is painful. Starting at quarterback, so Manziel and just as a whole, not necessarily you can go specifics if you want to, but just as a whole, how strong is the quarterback class?
When you look at them in general, could there be potential? Yeah. Do I see it? Not really with 2 out of the 3. I really only see with Bridgewater. I think he's the only one that can really be a franchise guy. I just think he's the best out of them all. We talk about Manziel being reckless and the injuries and all that other stuff. Blake Bortles, decent player, but to me, he just lacks that it factor. I think, and I think Bridgewater has it. Is Bridgewater perfect? By any means, no. I won't be surprised if none of these quarterbacks make it. I won't be surprised if somehow all three of them make it. I don't think that's going to happen. But they're kind of up and down for me for sure. I would say probably one of the weaker quarterback classes I've seen to date.
Really weaker? That's not a term I've heard. I mean, again, there isn't really a franchise. I mean, there's not a clear-cut franchise guy. And I'll just say this to describe the quarterback class. In a word, polarizing. In another word, really polarizing. Because just no one can project it. You can have player, or Coach A say one thing about a guy, and the other, and Coach B say something completely different. For any of these guys, they're all over the map. Anyone who says they know where quarterback's going to go is a liar, because nobody knows.
No, I mean anybody in general. I mean, we're at the point now where we're not even sure if Jadeveon Clowney is going to go number one.
Yeah. I mean, this whole draft class as a whole is really unpredictable, and no one knows how it's going to lay out, which makes it so exciting. But no, there's no position that exemplifies that more than quarterback, the unpredictability. It's not top-heavy, but it's really deep. Again, you talk about 10, 11 guys that can go within the first 3 rounds. And then you even have some later round guys that people will like, Keith Wenning from Ball State, or I'm blanking on some of the names right now. There's one guy, Tyler Russell from Mississippi State, some people like as a late-round sleeper. So the class is so deep. Derek Carr and Garoppolo and Savage, McCarron, Murray, Mettenberger. There's groups of draftniks that are in the corner of each one of those guys, and there's groups of draftniks who hate each one of those guys, and that just kind of sums up the quarterback position. So really exciting to watch, and I absolutely cannot wait for it. We'll go to running back now. I know we haven't talked about him a whole lot. It's not a particularly strong class. It's becoming weaker by the year. I know you haven't watched a whole lot of guys, but anyone you can tell me about that you've heard about at all, Matt?
I actually have not watched any running backs, Alex, but just from what I've seen from Trey Mason in game action, I think the game that he had in the championship game, really the whole season in general, especially against Alabama, I think he's a tough guy to bring down. He's got some very good size. Once he's out in the open, it's done. You're done for. You're not going to catch him. I think he's a very good downhill runner in between the tackles type of guy. So I would probably agree that he's probably the best running back in a weak class.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd have Mason as number one running back. I haven't watched a whole ton. I think I only have 2 that I've done. 3 I've done actual scouting reports on in this running back class. I think Carlos Hyde probably leads from Ohio State. Powerful, another downhill guy. And then you have, but yeah, there's no top guy. You have Trey Mason. You have Bishop Sankey from Washington. Again, that's something that's kind of been all over the map. Charles Sims from West Virginia, a guy that's versatile out of the backfield you talk about.
Will Bishop be a blessing to have for any team?
Wow, that was awful. That was awful. You should have just said nothing, and that would have been the preferred option. Storm Johnson, actually, I do like from Central Florida. Has some fumble problems, but a lot of size and speed. I like the combination. And a guy that can get downhill, and once he gets ahead of steam, I think he's actually got good speed, and he was a second gear in the open field. So I think Storm Johnson from Central Florida is a sleeper. You saw the guy from last year, Latavius Murray, drafted by the Raiders, and I think Storm Johnson will get drafted as well. But yeah, just not a great class. Actually, another running back I watched. I did watch more running backs, and I thought, oh, I'm totally wrong on this. Where's he at? Lake Seastrunk from Baylor. It's a gut feeling for me. I just don't think he's going to succeed. I think actually he has some stiffness in his hips, and he just didn't catch anything out of the backfield. He can't pass protect, pour out of the backfield. That's a bad way to try to get on the field as a rookie. Ditto for Andre Williams, who I watched. I don't think he caught a pass his senior year, and ditto was Seastrunk. And then I watched a small school kid, Lorenzo Talaferro from Coastal Carolina, and I saw him at the Senior Bowl. In back-on-backers drill. He did an awesome job in pass protection, but I just don't see the speed in that defining factor as a running back to make it at the next level at anything more than someone out of the backfield to use on third down at best. So not a big fan of him. And then Andre Williams, my comparison with Sean Green, which is not a glowing comparison. I just don't see a defining trait from Andre Williams. So that's my thought on the running back class. A couple guys there I do like, but of course that class gets weaker and weaker every year, it seems. Fullback, it's a dying breed. But nothing to talk about there. J.C. Copeland from LSU is probably your top guy. I saw him at the NFLPA game. He's a character. He swore on TV twice.
Whoops.
So, but yeah, he's an old school throwback. Mauler, but that's a dying breed. So, not much to talk about there. We'll move on now to wide receiver. Matt, I'll start with you. Give me your overall thoughts and feelings of this wide receiver class.
Well, obviously the strongest class in the whole draft, Alex. We've talked a lot about them today. Like I mentioned, I gave my top 5 earlier. There's a lot of guys that have. There's a lot of speed in this class. A lot of good hands. A lot of good route runners. And guys, I think that will make splashes in the NFL right away. All these guys can be that I've watched at least can be good downfield threats, and that teams will have to look out for. And when teams have to look out for these types of guys, that team's running game is going to be a lot better, especially if it's already good to begin with, like the Eagles, for an example. And if the Steelers were to get somebody like any of these receivers, then their running game can continue to grow and get better with Le'Veon Bell and his emergence from last year. So if you want your running game to get better in general, these receivers will definitely help out, because teams will not have that ability to put 8 guys in the box, because if they leave their quarterback out on an island with any of these guys right here, especially the 5 that really I guess 4. I don't think Benjamin's going to be that great, but the top 4 I would say, then they're not going to be successful. They're going to get burned easily.
Yeah, I mean, usually wide receiver takes some time for those guys to become impact players, but the talent pool is so good. I could see 2 or 3 of these guys making a big impact in their rookie years. I don't know who for sure, but I'm sure Watkins, Will, and Evans. It's a talented class, and it's so deep too, and you don't have time to go through all the guys that are there. But yeah, it's such a good class, and it's going to be just interesting to see how it works out. Because is there going to be a big run on wide receivers early in this draft, or are teams going to sit back and wait and say, hey, we can try to get a guy in the 2nd, 3rd round, and they're going to fall? One of those 2 things will probably happen. Which one, we'll find out. But it's a fantastic class. We haven't even mentioned guys like Cody Latimer from Indiana, who some people really, really like. It's such a good class. And yeah, I'm a big fan of Devontae Adams from Fresno State, and late round Quincy Enunwa from Nebraska. But fantastic class, probably the best one of any position in the 2014 NFL Draft. Again, Football Friday podcast, getting close to the end here. Alex Kozora, Matt Catrillo, and our marathon podcast. We'll move to tight end now. Another position we haven't talked about a whole lot. We've touched on Eric Ebron. Matt, I know you haven't watched too many tight ends, and it's not a particularly good class. But any insights you can shed on this tight end class?
Yeah, I'll even just to go to the combine, Alex. I was really got a chance to see some of the tight ends, and I was very disappointed.
It was.
So this is definitely not a good year for that for this year. I haven't really been able to watch a whole lot of tight ends, but I would say just the combine in itself kind of sums it up of how weak this class is.
Yeah, a lot of those guys got hurt. Ebron got hurt. Austin Seferian-Jenkins from Washington was hurt. There's a couple guys I do like. I do like Jason Morrow from Texas Tech. A huge body. I think he's 6'6" with a big frame. Who's not an elite athlete, but a very good athlete, especially for his size. Tough to bring down in the open field because of it. He's a raw blocker, like I said, with Ebron, just because he didn't block doesn't mean he can't block. Got very little use as an inline blocker. He basically played exclusively in the slot. I do like Jason Morrow, though. The Jets have shown a lot of interest in him. And he's another one of those move tight ends that can be a big threat in the red zone. Of course, Ebron's my number 1 tight end, like 99% of the rest of the draft picks, if I had to say. Some other guys, just to mention him, Troy Nichols from Notre Dame. You're a Notre Dame fan. You've seen him a little bit.
Oh, yeah. I love Troy Nichols. He was an emerging star. Good size, very good hands, very versatile, too. You can put him in the slot, outside. Inline blocker. He's a very good blocker, too. He's a stud. I think he's probably one of the better ones in this class.
Yeah, he's got great size at 6'6", 270, probably one of the biggest tight ends in this class that can move. And of course, decent pedigree there with Tyler Eifert getting drafted 2 years ago,
and fairly highly too. Tyler Eifert was a top 15 pick.
Yeah,
I mean, and deservedly so, because he made an impact in his first year. I mean, he was one of the big parts of how good the Cincinnati offense is.
And then one guy I did like late, Blake, and I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Blake Annan, or Nen, probably Annan, from Cincinnati. A guy the Eagles actually showing a lot of interest in, who ran really well. He ran in the low 4.4s at his pro day. At that time could be fudged a little bit, as pro days times are wont to do. Didn't play that time on tape, but only a 1-year starter. But I thought there was something there to be intrigued by. 7th round flyer, I wouldn't be opposed to it for any team.
I can see that connection just briefly, Alex, for the Eagles, because Brent Selleck is a Cincinnati product, and he's done well for the Eagles ever since he got drafted. So I can see that happening.
There you go. We'll go to the offensive linemen now. We haven't talked about really them at all, which is a little disappointing because it's also one of the best classes that this draft class has to offer. Matt, I see you shuffling your papers around. So you got any insight on these guys?
I mean, I've only watched Jake Matthews, and like I said, I think he's the most athletic offensive lineman I've ever seen. But just by seeing guys in game action and all that from this past year, a lot of speed and athleticism in this class, and it's something that you really want to see now in the NFL, especially if you have teams that like to run the bubble screen, like to run the screen passes, guys that can just simply get out on the flat quick enough and can pass block well. And as we mentioned before in talking about Jake Matthews earlier in the podcast, Alex, offensive linemen nowadays, you better be able to pass protect pretty well because the NFL is a passing league, especially if you are protecting the quarterback's blind side. There's nothing worse than having a quarterback that doesn't trust that blind side, because then he has a tendency to get skitterish, and that forces him to make mistakes, which can ultimately cost you a game. But if he trusts that solid blind side, quarterback can stand there and throw all day, put a nice barbecue out, throw a couple nice passes and all that stuff. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very important. But I'd probably say it is the definitely one of the highest classes, possibly even second highest class.
Yeah, they're led by the big three, and the order can change depending on who you talk to. Jake Matthews from Texas A&M, Taylor Lewan from Michigan, and Greg Robinson from Auburn. All guys that could be in that top 5, top 10.
You had Robinson, though, is overrated.
I do, and I was going to touch on him. He's a guy that could go as high as number 2 to St. Louis. I see him as a mid-first round. I love the talent I think he has. I say this very seriously and with the realization of what the impact I'm saying is. I think he has Larry Allen type strength. The guy is a house, and he's got amazing elite strength, and he's a really good athlete for his size. Again, guys, it's Bill Parcells' planet theory. There's only so many guys on this earth that can be that big and move that well. It's a very finite number, and Robinson fits that. Where I pause with Robinson is that, one, his pass protection is raw, because at Auburn it was an option offense, so he didn't have to kick slide very often, and he was doing a lot of down blocking, not even a lot of base blocking at Auburn, because they were doing a lot of down blocking if their run was 2 or really even away. So he's raw with that. His pass protection, his kick slide, that's something he's going to have to do a lot of work and a lot of repetition on it. I don't know if he can be a day 1 starter left tackle because of how raw he is. The other part, and another big part, I think he's technically unsound. He's on the ground way too much. He does not carry his lower half. He's a raw guy because he's still young, still trying to hone his craft. But I don't see him as a left tackle. I think he's really best to start out as a guard in a power scheme where he can base block and really just run block to death. But I think he's a mid-first rounder. He's got some flaws. He's on the ground way too much. Gets himself way too overextended. A lot of things with Robinson has to get cleaned up, and that pass protection is an unknown. Rarely should those guys go that high to be a left tackle when your pass protection is such an unknown element. Can he do it? Yeah, I think he probably could down the line, but it's an unknown and nothing that he can do right away. So I do like the class as a whole, though. It's always strong. Quandro. Morgan Moses, who really surprised me. I saw him at the Combine. Terrible at the Combine. I like him a lot better on tape. He's made on a natural left tackle, but he's new to that position. He was a right tackle for his first couple years, moved to left tackle his senior year. He's got flat back on his punch, but he's a good athlete, better than anticipated. He's got good length, a lot of upper body strength, so not a big fan, but I'm a fan of Morgan Moses. Guys we haven't even talked about yet, Jaywan James from Tennessee. So it's a really good class, as it always tends to be. We'll go to the interior linemen now. We'll touch on them briefly. I mean, you're really led by David Yankee at Stanford, but he's all over the map. One scout the other day called him an undrafted free agent. That's where he would grade him as. It's a pretty weak guard class. Last year was really good with Chance Warmack and Jonathan Cooper. This year it's not even close, man. They're really poor.
Yeah. I would definitely agree. I think tackle is definitely the way to go for this year.
So we'll move on now to the defensive side of the ball. At defensive end, it starts with your Davion Clowney, Matt.
I mean, yeah. What more can you say about him? I mean, like I said at the beginning of the podcast, the fact that he's even talked about that he might drop a spot is just mind-boggling to me. And that's all I'll say for that one. Michael Sam talked about him. I think there's more talent than people think, but we'll see where he ends up. And Alex, you touched on Lewis Nix before, defensive tackle from Notre Dame. Obviously, being the Notre Dame fan, I really enjoyed watching him play. Such a great athlete. He's an absolute monster. Great motor. Always keeps his feet moving. Explosive off the ball. Great swim move. Bull rusher. Gets off blocks well. Tackles well. Extremely great against the run. He keeps his hands up and actually reads the quarterback's eyes sometimes. He had a lot of batted passes in his career, which is, to me, really impressive for an interior defensive lineman, especially nose tackle. I mean, that's just monster-ish right there. Always, just overall, a constant disruption. I think he can go as high as a mid-first round pick. As late as a late first round, I would be shocked if he was not a first-round pick overall. I just really enjoyed watching him at Notre Dame, and he will make an impact right away in the NFL.
I'll touch on nose tackle and defensive tackles here in a second. I'll talk about defensive ends. It's led by Clowney. I'll move because I watched mostly 5-techs because as a Steelers fan, of course, that's what you're looking for. A lot of good 5-techs in this class. I talked about Will Clark before. I think he's got good value in the third round. And one guy, another Notre Dame guy I really, really like is Stephon Tuitt.
Yeah, he was excellent too.
A guy that might have had a quote-unquote down senior year by some people's opinion, but had a hernia surgery that was dogging him throughout the year. A guy that's 21 years old. He's still going to grow. He's still getting better.
He's such a tremendous athlete too. And he was also a constant disruption as well. And he read the quarterback's eyes well, and he had a lot of passes knocked down as well, which is, again, impressive for an interior defensive lineman.
A great athlete with an arsenal. I think it's Cam Hayward. I think it's another Cam Hayward. And I say that with the realization that Cam Hayward is an all-star. That's to me, at least. I think hopefully the NFL is going to find out this year.
Yeah, definitely another good fit for the Steelers. For sure.
I would be ecstatic to get him in the second round. Stephon Tuitt all day. I'll take Stephon Tuitt. Another 5-tech. I just watched Taylor Hart from Oregon. I think he's got a lot of comparisons from other people saying this, and I'll chime in on it too. Is Brett Kiesel, a guy they're decent athletes, not great athletes, but decent athletes with excellent motors. Hart has one of the best motors I've seen of the 51 guys I've done the scouting report on. He's probably got the best motor. There was one play he chased down Brandon Cooks from Oregon State, who's a little slot kid, 5'8", 180 pounds. He chased him down, and I had to watch that play like 4 times because it was amazing. Cook's another guy in the wide receiver class we didn't talk about. Small guy, right, but a big threat.
How does he do in the facial hair department?
Was that a joke?
Yeah. Oh, joke/real question. Since we're comparing him to Brett Kiesel here.
Oh, how does Taylor Hart
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I thought Brandon Cook.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Not Brett Cook. Yeah. No.
Don't believe he has a beard. Disappointing on that.
That is a little disappointing.
I found a picture of Brett Kiesel from his college day at BYU. It's fun to look at.
Do you still have your pretty awesome looking shirt, Brett Kiesel?
Brett Kiesel shirt, the Fear of the Bird? Yeah. Of course I do.
That makes you a man just even wearing that.
Take it as a compliment, I think. But I like Taylor Hart. I mean, he's still got leverage issues because he's 6'6", but I love the effort, the motor. I think it's an infectious trait. Great football IQ. Another guy that gets his hands up, bats passes down, sniffed out multiple screens, so he'd be a bad guy to go against you, Matt, because he would snuff out every single screen pass you try to throw at him.
Yeah, we'd still find a way to get him down.
But I think a good value there, again, 4th round, Taylor Hart. And I don't know if he'll ever be an all-star, certainly not the pass rusher that Tuitt is, but a guy that really plays hard. Just got to work on getting his butt down, and leverage is an issue with him. Back at defensive tackle, you touched on Lewis Nix. Anyone else you want to talk about there?
Actually, Nix is the only defensive tackle that I watch, but definitely him and Tuitt. They were studs, and I really enjoyed watching
Tuitt will likely be in.
It's true. He'll likely be in it.
Inside.
He can play. He is very versatile, which will definitely help him out.
Mainly play.
But he'll probably be better. Yeah.
I really see him as a 3-4 end.
I would agree.
The defensive tackle class is really good too, and it's led by Aaron Donald from Pitt. If you ask me, I mean, we talked about him before.
Yeah, and his stock is rising now too, and he's risen into the top 15 possibly.
Probably even top 10. He can go that high. So again, he has, over half his tackles in his career either went for a loss or were for a sack. That great first step, good effort. High character, no medical problems. I mean, he's as clean as they come as a prospect. Some other guys in this class, Dominic Easley from Florida, got hurt towards ACL, I believe, this year. But you look at 2012 tape. Rashid Hagman, a great story. People said he's inconsistent, but when he's on his game, he's really as dominant as almost anybody in this draft. Rashid Hagman, another big guy at 6'6", well over 300 pounds, and timed really well at the combine. Was off the charts at the combine. I believe that's one more I want to do. Daniel McCullers from Tennessee. I don't like him. He's a house. He's how tall is he? He's almost 6'7", 335.
Wow,
340.
that's King Dumlack right there.
It's all got to come back to the Eagles, doesn't it, Matt? My
well, he's a Charger now, so not really.
Yeah, but he was drafted by the Eagles. He's got 36 and a quarter inch arms, the longest arms by far in this draft. But I don't like him because he's just slow off the ball. And yeah, he's a nose tackle, but you got to have a decent first step. Otherwise, you're going to lose. You're going to get out leveraged and blown off the ball, and he does. He's got a bad first step. You can actually really see he got knocked in his butt in one game because he just has a bad first step. So if you have a bad first step, even if you're big ugly, you still got to be good off the ball.
That's a long way down, isn't it?
It is a long way down. You need to go out yelling timber. So I'm not a fan of McCullers from Tennessee. We'll go to outside linebackers now. Of course, we start with Khalil Mack now.
Hands down.
Anyone else? We've talked about Mack enough, I think.
Yeah, definitely. For me, Alex, Mack is one. Telvin Smith, too. I've raved about him. I absolutely love what he can do. C.J. Mosley, 3.
Well, that's inside. We'll get to inside.
I'm sorry, inside, yeah. I don't, not to get into a base right now. We're just about 2.5 hours into this thing. But I know you absolutely do not like D. Ford whatsoever.
Correct.
But I think he's extremely athletic, really fast off the ball. Definitely more of an edge rusher than bull rusher. Can force his man to the inside. Great closing speed, especially on the quarterback. He sometimes does have trouble maintaining his balance coming off an edge rush because he sometimes rushes at a low angle. Also has a lot of tendencies to jump offside, so he has to do a much better job of watching the ball. But I think he's a little bit more talented than what you think. But
it's not for a lack of talent. He's just Aaron Mabry. He's got one move. He's got a speed rush, and that's it. And that doesn't get me too excited because if you're a one-trick pony, you're not going to last long in the NFL, especially against NFL caliber left tackles. And he's got a slight frame. He can't really add on much weight. He's Aaron Mabry 2.0. I think he's going to be a bust in the NFL. Good guy. Can play the piano really well. He's like a really good character guy. I'm not rooting against him. I just don't see it there. I was first amazed with that speed, but then I just saw it over and over and over again. Hasn't enough counter moves. His arsenal is really, really limited. So
I thought he had a great game too in the championship game against Florida State.
I can't get on board with him. And just one rush. You gotta bring something more than that. You gotta give him counter moves. Biggest thing outside linebackers have to learn in today's NFL. These rookies, they don't counter. They have the one move, and that's it. You get push up the arc and washed every single time. A couple other guys I've looked at. Kyle Van Noy from BYU. I do like. He's a smart player. He's got good length. I think he's got to work on his arsenal too. He can be a little over aggressive at times. Anthony Barr from UCLA, talent-wise, is off the charts. But another guy that's raw, played offense for a while, and now he's switched to outside linebacker. I think he's only got 2 years at linebacker, so a guy that's raw and has to learn his craft. But you've seen enough flashes for Barr, you can say, I know what he can be, and if we work with him, he can be consistent at that and be a great pass rusher. So I like Anthony Barr, but there's a project with that. So that's what I got at outside linebacker.
Yeah, a couple. I definitely know there's a strong class, a lot of speed in this class is too, Alex. A lot of good playmakers, so it'll be interesting to see where they all go.
We talked about cornerbacks, so we can really skip that. We talked about that for I think.
I think we're good. I think it's a good strong class, Alex. I mean, I've only been able to watch a few, but we have some stocks that are rising, but we'll see where they go too.
And then real quick, it's safety. I mean, you watched Dixon Pryor. Which one do you like more?
I probably have to. It's kind of difficult. I'm kind of at the same with both of them. Calvin Pryor, a guy that definitely can play. Great closing speed on tackles, but my biggest problem with him is he has a tendency to over pursue. Definitely a hard hitter, can force turnovers, no doubt about that. Great on special teams too. I'm probably as a late first, early second round pick. I know it's a little high. A lot of people don't like him because of the over pursuing thing, but I think he's a pretty good player. Clinton and Dix, another solid one. Good speed, especially closing in for a tackle. Hard hitter as well. can play well in the open field, making a play. Great in coverage, too. Size did hurt him in a few jump ball situations. Was late getting over into coverage on a few plays. But depending on the schematics of that, it might not have been his fault. I have him as an early second to mid-second round pick, but for whatever reason, I can probably see him going in the first round, too. I know he's projected to.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of...
Probably both will.
Yeah, so I'm kind of even on both those guys.
Yeah, I put Clinton Dix a little bit before. I like his length some more. I think he's a bigger, not a harder hitter, because Pryor actually really is. But I think he's probably better in center field, faster, longer strider. I think Pryor's speed deficient and a little bit smaller as well. So I'll take Clinton Dix. And some other guys later on I didn't get to watch, but I'm excited by Deion Buchanan from Washington. And maybe there's hopefully a late round gem there. So I think that's you want to go top five. We'll just go through top five real
fast. Yeah. For me, Alex, number one, I have Jadeveon Clowney going to Houston. Of course, this is all barring any trades that happen. But I really do think that Atlanta. Either way, I think that Clowney's going to go number one.
Okay.
As I think it's just totally ridiculous.
Okay, run through.
That he's good. That he would even go worse than that. But I think Atlanta's going to jump up and get him. Okay. I really do think so.
Okay.
Second. I think St. Louis is. I think you're going to see drop out too. But if they were to stay there, I think Jake Matthews will go there too. They can use some offensive line help. Third, I have Teddy Bridgewater going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I kind of teased that earlier in the podcast. I think he's the best quarterback in this draft. Jacksonville obviously needs a quarterback, and so I think that's where Bridgewater's going to go. Fourth, I have Sammy Watkins to the Cleveland Browns.
Okay.
I think Brian Hoyer is a better quarterback than what people think. I think we need to see more of him in game action because unfortunately he got hurt last year, and he really had some good showings rather.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
I think that game in Minnesota kind of proves what he can do. I mean, Cleveland just couldn't get anything going, and then all of a sudden he had those two great drives for them to win it. I think that game went in overtime, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't remember.
And if they were to draft Sammy Watkins, you're talking about probably Cleveland will emerge having one of the best receiving cores in the league. Because then you would have Jordan Cameron, you would have Josh Gordon, and then you had Sammy Watkins. I mean, that's a lot of speed you would see, both inside and out. And then I have Khalil Mack going to the Oakland Raiders. I mean, that defense needs a lot of help, especially on the quarterbacks. But going in the secondary, probably a little bit high for them at 5. They can use some help at outside linebacker, especially in coverage. Khalil Mack would definitely help them out there.
I'll run through my top 5 here real quick. And this one's actually against the grain. I think what will happen, maybe what should happen. Number 1, Khalil Mack to Houston. Gil Branton had reported that. I think it's going to pick up steam. I thought it was just smoke screen at first. Maybe not. Number 2, St. Louis, Greg Robinson. I'm not a big fan of him, but I think that's something that they will do. Probably their top tackle. I'll probably take one of the tackles, either Matthews or Robinson. Number 3, Jadeveon Clowney. That's where he will fall to. Jaguars will need pass rushing help. Manziel at number 4 for Cleveland. New regime. So, yeah, I did like Brian Hoyer last year, but off the torn ACL and the new regime, they want to get their guy. It'll be Manziel. And then number 5, Sammy Watkins for the Oakland Raiders to give them an infusion of speed and to be a playmaker on that offense for Oakland. So, again, Mack, Robinson, Clowney, Manziel, and Watkins.
And then again, for mine is Clowney, Matthews, Bridgewater, Watkins, and Khalil Mack.
So I think that'll just about do it for us. Thank you again if you've listened this long. Wow, that went a whole lot longer than expected.
God bless you.
But that was a lot of fun, Matt.
It was.
So again, for the Football Friday podcast and for SteelersDepot.com, I'm Alex Kozora with Matt Catrillo. Thank you guys for listening and enjoy the draft.